I'd like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, October 6, 2020, and the Portland Board of Public Education is meeting virtually through Zoom. May I please ask the superintendent to call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Atkinson.
Here.
Mr. Balfons.
Here.
Ms. Mondo.
Présente.
Mr. Burke.
Here.
Ms. Figdor.
Here.
Ms. Morioni.
Here.
Ms. Thompson.
Here.
Ms. Trevorrow.
Here.
And Chair Rodriguez.
Presente. Let's get the flag shared on the screen, and I'll lead us through the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, that was fast. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. For the report of the chair, I want to just take a few moments to go over the meeting protocols, and also I have a few announcements to make. So first of all, as usual with our virtual meetings, any vote will be taken by roll call, and the superintendent has helped us out with that. Committee members are going to use the raise your hand feature on Zoom, found by selecting the participants button at the bottom of your screen or in the sidebar. Should they wish to address the school board, I will acknowledge the speaker, and then I'll ask you to please lower your hands when you're done speaking. For the public, any opportunity for public comment will be announced, and members of the public will also use the raise your hand feature provided by Zoom. This feature is either found on the webinar control bar at the bottom of your screen, or it can be found by selecting your name on the participant screen. I will call the name of the person who's raised their hand, ask them to we'll provide 3 minutes for them to comment. And should we near the 3-minute mark, I will ask the speaker if additional time is needed, and then grant an additional minute if necessary. And then once that time is over, we'll probably mute the speaker's microphone. And again, any opportunity for public comment, I will announce and go over the rules once again before that. As far as announcements, I want to remind the board that we are looking for a board member to serve as delegate for the annual delegate assembly, which is taking place on the first day of the MSMA annual fall conference. And I had the date for that right in front of me, and I took it out of the screen. But that is coming up now in October.
I believe it's October 30th.
October 30th. So we're going to select that delegate at our next board meeting. So please, if you're interested, just let me know between now and then, and we'll get the agenda written accordingly. Excuse me. The only other announcement that I have is in regard to tonight's agenda. I sent a communication earlier today that we're going to just do a small little change unless there's anyone with an objection to it. And that's that we're after the superintendent's report, we're going to open up an opportunity for public comment around the topic of the school reopening update. And then I'll still have a public comment opportunity at the end of the meeting, given that, we didn't announce this opportunity in time. I don't want to do away with the second part, or the second opportunity for public comment. I don't have any other announcements for today, so I'll hand it over to the superintendent for his report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to begin my comments today by recognizing the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand, the Maliseet, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes, known collectively as the Wabanaki, or people of the Dawnland. We're honored to have their children among our students today. I respectfully say this land acknowledgement at every meeting in recognition of the fact that as a district, we know that we stand on land that was here long before white settlers arrived, and that it was the home of Indigenous people long before then. Next week, as we celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, I encourage our staff, students, and families to take a moment to reflect on and learn about how this land came to be a part of the state of Maine and honor the proud history of the first people who inhabited it. I announce with pride tonight that 5 of our high school seniors recently were named semifinalists in the 2021 National Merit Scholarship Program. That's the highest number of National Merit semifinalists from the Portland Public Schools in more than 5 years. 2 of the semifinalists are Portland High School students, Liam Foley and Andrew Leonard. 2 are Deering High School students, Aiden Bloom Levine and Matthew Keast, and 1 is Casco Bay High School student, Oscar McNally. I'm not 100% sure that this is still true, but my understanding is that Drew, Aiden, and Oscar are with us tonight. I do see Aiden. Yep, okay, great. And Liam and Matthew were not able to attend, although I believe that Liam's mom, Lisa, might be with us as well. So these amazing young people are now in the running to compete for more than $30 million in National Merit Scholarships that will be offered and awarded this spring and summer. These students are among just 68 students, Maine seniors, who have achieved the honor of becoming National Merit semifinalists this fall. To put it even more in perspective, they were among those selected from a pool of more than 1.5 million high school juniors nationwide who took the PSAT National Merit Scholarship qualifying test in the fall of 2019. To become finalists in the scholarship competition, semifinalists must meet the criteria that includes having an outstanding academic record throughout high school, being involved in school and community activities, showing leadership abilities, and earning very high SAT or ACT scores. Liam, Andrew, Aiden, Matthew, and Oscar are already exemplary for having achieved National Merit semifinalist recognition. And I will add that credit goes not only to these hardworking students, but of course also to their teachers and other supporters, including their families, who play together a vital role in helping our students to succeed academically. At the Portland Public Schools, we're incredibly proud of you, and I wish you all the best as you continue on this competition. If we were in person, you would be getting a standing ovation and a certificate and even some pictures. So you will still get a certificate through the mail, but instead of an ovation, you will be getting Zoom reactions from all of us, as well as our beaming smiles. So congratulations to all of you. We very much look forward to following your journey in this most irregular school year. And I don't know, I believe that Principal Jepson was also here. I also see that Principal Pierce is here, and I don't know if either of the co-principals from Deering are here. But Mr. Pierce, I see you. Would you like to say anything about Oscar? Or is Miss Jepson here? I don't, Miss Jepson is here. Great. So in either one of you, in whichever order you would prefer.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, Sheila.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, very proud of Liam and Andrew, or Drew, and I think both students have taken the most rigorous course load that we offer at Portland High. I'm excited for them, and they'll continue on in the process working with their counselors, Miss Medeiros and Miss Karen, to move on to the next level of this. So very excited. Congratulations to Drew and Liam, and very proud of you. And you get my virtual high five also.
Mr. Pierce.
Yeah, if you got a problem, Oscar McNally would like to solve it or help you solve it, whether he's unpacking a calculus conundrum or helping a middle school client in Maine Youth Court make amends for vandalism, whether he's providing feedback to a peer about a presentation that's as wise as it is humble, or sharing ideas in student government about how our school can sustain community amidst remote learning and a pandemic. Oscar McNally is a comprehensively formidable problem solver, deeply curious and precociously insightful. He's one of the most complete, genuine scholars I've had the pleasure of working with in nearly 30 years of working with seniors. He's a terrific human also, and most importantly, moral, compassionate, grounded, even noble. Congrats, Oscar.
Awesome. Thank you, both of you. And again, congratulations to all 5 of our amazing students. We are incredibly proud, and a big thank you to your parents as well, because as I said earlier, this wouldn't be possible without the strong support that you've received along the way. So thank you. A couple weeks ago, Deering High School co-principals Allison Dame and Abdullahi Ahmed posted a statement on Deering's Facebook page in response to the decision by a grand jury in Kentucky to not bring charges against the police officers for for the killing of Breonna Taylor. The co-principal's post was a heartfelt pledge to the Deering High School community to work to create a better and more just society through their work at Deering. Their statement acknowledges the pain of students who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and committed Deering to prioritizing the restoration of their BIPOC students' wellness. As with many statements, it was controversial. There were some who called for retracting the statement and even disciplinary consequences for Ms. Dame and Dr. Ahmed on the ground that as educational leaders, they must remain outside of the fray. I would like to take this opportunity to renew my complete support for their right and obligation to do what they did. I hold that they did exactly what our equity goal asks us all to do: give visibility to and root out systemic and ongoing inequities when and where we see them. I share with them and many of you frustration with the grand jury's decision. It underscores for me how our justice system is set up to systematically preserve white supremacy and repress people who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. I feel fortunate to work in a school system that upholds their right to speak out as they did. As several on the board recall, in 2017, in response to a hate incident against some of our students and the efforts by some to silence our outrage, the school board passed a resolution affirming staff's First Amendment rights and citing applicable policies GBH and GB. This is not something that we should take for granted, and I reminded all of our staff of that. There are many school districts across the country that do not allow this. I believe we are better for your willingness, indeed for your encouragement to have us do so. Some of our principals and teachers have faced challenges from families about their postings of support for equity issues in their profiles, in their classrooms, and in school marquees. I do not expect that these positions are universally held by all in the Portland school community, and I respect the rights of others to disagree with my position and their right to say so, which is guaranteed, again, by the same policies that afford me, Allison, Abdullahi, and all of our staff the right to make our statements. I do want to be clear that we draw the line and will not tolerate statements that seek to intimidate, dehumanize, or lessen the humanity of any of the members of our community. I urge everyone in the Portland Public Schools community to engage in creating a more equitable system consistent with our shared Portland Promise commitments with passion, conviction, and an enduring commitment to the civil discourse consistent with our community norms. On a related note, I would like to remind board members and the public that our parent university will host a session entitled "Our Children Are Watching: The Impact of Racism on Children" tomorrow evening, Wednesday, October 7th, from 5:30 to 7 via Zoom. We're excited to welcome Dr. Jackie Dowge, both a pediatrician and a parent. Dr. Dowge is a co-author of the American Academy of Pediatrics policy statement on the impact of racism on child and adolescent health. Joining as panelists will be PPS parents and caregivers, school leaders and administrators, and we will listen, learn, and engage in dialogue about this important topic, and I hope that many in the community will be able to join parent you for that discussion. We completed our third week of school, and to date, our reentry has worked as we had hoped. Every week, students in pre-K through 9th grade have been able to attend in person, thanks to the hard work of everyone who toiled to get us to the starting block. Since then, with the support and the continued hard work of our staff, students, and family, we have been able to successfully continue in-person learning. We received news that the governor continued to prioritize school reopening by directing significant resources for this purpose. We expect to receive an additional $6 million and are extremely grateful to the Governor and Commissioner of Education for this support. Unfortunately, these additional funds have to be used by December 31st, and their current guidelines limit how much can be prepaid now for the rest of the school year on things such as service contracts and software, and absolutely not for staffing. We will be discussing where we are with the original grant and our plans for this next iteration with the board's finance committee this coming Thursday. As you know, I continue to be concerned that we will need to discontinue a significant number of positions that we have been able to put in place with this funding to support our school reopening. When we finalized our hybrid reopening plan in August, we said we would review our elementary school experience and determine whether to bring back our elementary, our pre-kindergarten through grade 5 students back to full-time in-person learning on October 13th. As you know, last week, after a review of a variety of data points, I announced that we would not be bringing back our pre-K through 5th grade students back full-time yet. At the time of the announcement, I indicated that we would be reviewing the data points considered in making this decision with you today. And in your packet, you received a memorandum outlining our data points and thinking. Today, Assistant Superintendent Aaron Townsend, Executive Director of Human Resources Barb Stoddard, and I will walk you through those details. Let me start by saying that in general, space, distancing, and staffing challenges, along with the potential for significant number of students currently in our remote academy returning to in-person instruction at the trimester break, are likely to prevent us from bringing students back full-time in the foreseeable future. We recognize the challenge that 2 days of in-person instruction and 3 days remote pose for families, and we're extremely grateful for our community partners who have stepped in to provide support to our families during these remote days and in the before and after school hours. We will continue to look for ways to increase those options and make them more accessible to our students and families. During our school reopening discussions with you in August, we also committed to looking at ways to increase the in-person learning experience for high school students in grades 10 through 12. As you know, because of our concern about the mixing of cohorts inherent in the traditional high school schedule, we have kept all of our classes for students in these grades online. We did implement an afternoon learning center program, which is designed to afford students in those grades opportunities for social and academic interactions with their peers and teachers. And as part of our presentation tonight, we'll be discussing how that implementation is going and where we expect to go from here. So with that, I will turn it over to Aaron to walk you through this process. Aaron, you're muted.
Yep. So thank you, Superintendent, and good evening, board members and the public that's here with us tonight. Before I dive in, I'd like to echo the appreciation for all of our incredibly hardworking staff from every kind of corner of our system who's made it possible for us to have this successful first month of school. I also want to acknowledge and appreciate the support of you all as our board with these efforts. So with our presentation tonight, the goal of our presentation is to provide you some additional insight into some of the key reopening metrics or data points that we considered in making our determination for our ongoing school plan. Our successful launch was the result of over 100 talented minds collaborating on a reopening plan. However, we're also aware that we are operating in a unique environment that no one has ever really navigated, and this initial review was helpful to assess, quote, how the rubber has really met the road now that we're in school and we have students and teachers back in our buildings for the first time in many months. As a reminder, throughout this effort, we have identified these guiding principles for our school plan for this year, centered around our core value of equity. We are prioritizing and we have prioritized in our plans and continue in our ongoing efforts to prioritize the safety, wellness, agility, coherence, and culture across the system to be able to achieve as much as we can during this time and come out of this experience a stronger school system and a stronger community. These principles will continue to inform our decision-making as we move forward. As you'll remember, before we jump into the data of the review, I want to offer a few brief reminders. First, the reopening plan that was approved in mid-August indicated that we would open in a yellow hybrid model, start for grades pre-K through 9, and the remote learning plan for grades 10 through 12 with the Learning Center as the superintendent indicated. This plan indicated the potential to return to in-person 5 days per week for pre-K through 5 as of this coming Tuesday, October 13th. Additionally, in addition to the elementary return, we had committed at that time to evaluating our readiness to increase high school in-person instruction after our first month of school, which is the end of this week. As well, for the middle school, as indicated in our reopening plan, we are planning and continue to plan to maintain the hybrid model for middle school through the end of the first trimester. I would also like to note here at this time, that when we initially rolled out this plan, our consideration was that if the state designation shifted to yellow or red, that we would transition into a fully remote learning environment. As we'll detail shortly, we are fortunate that we have not landed at that place yet. As we can speak about through the presentation, we believe that if we were to go yellow, that we may be able to maintain our hybrid learning model, given the success in protecting staff, student, and community health through this first month through the implementation of our protocols. So, based on these initial recommendations in our school launch, the first 3.5 weeks of school, we conducted an initial review of a variety of data points to inform our next steps. We reviewed our regional and local health data. We considered our facilities data, as we have now experienced being in the buildings with the health and safety protocols. We analyzed our staffing data and student attendance data, in addition to gathering input from our school leaders and nurses. Based on this review, we identified these key findings. First, that while locally we have been able to maintain and have not had any positive COVID cases, we do see an increase of COVID cases regionally, which poses a cause for concern. The second is that, as we'll detail, our facilities and the health and safety requirements pose a significant challenge to increasing and coming back into the 5 days a week, in particular for our students and at the high school for our 10th through 12th grade students. Alongside that, there are a handful of staffing challenges due to the number of staff that have requested accommodations or flexible work arrangements and the potential need for additional staff to maintain our health and safety protocols if we increased in-person attendance. A bright spot thus far, or one element of this, is that we have had positive initial student attendance data, both in our in-person and remote learning experiences that we've offered for students. The notable exception, as we'll talk about, and the most significant weakness of our reopening thus far has been our Learning Center model, and we'll talk further about that as we move forward. Lastly, one of the key findings of the experience over this first couple of weeks is, both being observed being in buildings and as reported by school leaders and teachers and staff, has been the establishment of routines with our health and safety protocols that are allowing us to be able to increase kind of the level of academic engagement and rigor and really get into the curriculum in a way that we would aspire to with in-person learning when students are in the building and through the synchronous learning experiences for our 10th through 12th graders. So this allows us the opportunity to focus and improve on the delivery of those services as opposed to trying to manage an additional transition in the immediate future. So as the superintendent has summarized previously, and I'll just touch on briefly, based on these key findings, we've made the following determinations. For elementary, all mainland schools will remain in hybrid through at least the end of the first trimester, which is December 4th. We will be extending the pilot of our community partnership model to provide remote day and Wednesday and before and after care options for elementary families. As a note, as it says, and we'll talk further, that specifically the 6-foot physical distancing requirement poses a real challenge for us to be able to consider at any point, unless those protocols are relaxed, to bringing all students back 5 days per week. At the secondary level, as the superintendent said, through the end of the first quarter, so based on kind of our commitments to evaluate this, we will remain in the remote learning through the end of the first quarter for Deering and Portland in the first trimester through Casco Bay, at which time, we will be prepared pending the ongoing kind of status of, the health data to be able to begin to increase our in-person opportunities for students. However, in the short term, we will focus on increasing our learning center attendance by requiring additional sessions for students and staff throughout the week. So increasing the number of required sessions and student participation that teachers are asked to hold throughout that time to ensure we're able to increase the numbers and provide those opportunities for academic and social support for students while we move towards the end of the first quarter and trimester. So I'd like to step briefly through a few of these pieces of data, that you've seen in the memo, just to provide a little additional context. So the first one is just, again, this brief summary of where we stand on the color coding designations from the state. So fortunately, we are in the place where we have remained green for each evaluation. There will be another one this Friday, so we will get an additional update at that point. Again, this is every 2 weeks. So while we definitely feel good about the trajectory of Cumberland County in general, based on this data, we do acknowledge that across the southern Maine region, we've seen a distressing increase of cases, leading both York and Oxford counties to be designated yellow per the state system. So 2 of the 4, kind of neighboring counties for us are now designated yellow, and Androscoggin County is on an elevated kind of watch list where they're being reviewed on a weekly basis. So these trends do give us a bit of pause in accelerating our return to full-time in-person instruction, given the increase of cases that we're seeing regionally. However, again, focusing on Cumberland County, this is some of the trends of data, and while we certainly, it's not going the direction anybody wants and that it continues to go up, it is not going up at a dramatic rate, fortunately, and we have not seen the kinds of outbreaks in Cumberland County, that unfortunately have occurred in some of our other regional kind of communities, as indicated by the color coding for the state in those counties. So, that being said, within the county, there have been a number of schools, as I'm sure you're aware, that have had issues and have had instances of positive COVID cases in school districts within the county. So that includes Falmouth School District, Freeport, Yarmouth, Scarborough most recently. So this again, gives us a bit of pause as there's evidence that a continued health risks exist within our community. And again, we continue to feel encouraged by what we're seeing as we look at this data, but recognize that there remains a risk in the overall broader community of infections and and so forth. So just very briefly, again, we are pleased that we have not yet had any positive COVID cases associated with the school district. I hesitate to jinx us, but our school site teams and students and families have done an amazing job sharing in this responsibility to keep everyone safe. As you'll recall in our initial presentations, really presenting this as a shared responsibility, and appreciate that that's been our experience over this first month. Our nurses are working extremely hard to coordinate care and testing for any students and staff that have indicated potential symptoms to ensure that we are on top of any of these situations and are prepared to enact any of our response protocols and communication were we to have a positive COVID case. So the last piece of health data that we've been monitoring, and one of the kind of most significant challenges in our reopening, has been in the utilization of our symptom screening tool. The deployment of this tool has highlighted challenges we have in maintaining consistent and accurate contact information for all of our students and families. And this has created a significant burden on a daily basis for as our nurses, building aides, and administrators are dedicating significant amounts of time each morning to do the screening in person when significant numbers of students have not, students and families have not completed the screening prior to school. So we are able to manage that at this time. There is kind of differing impacts at schools. The trend most significantly is that our schools with higher populations of multilingual families and higher populations of free and reduced lunch are having the most challenge. That's where we see the greatest challenge with maintaining the consistent contact information. And so we have deployed a number of strategies to try and bring this down, getting people to opt into the text systems and a variety of reach out and engagement with the families that have been consistently not responding to try and increase these rates. That being said, this at the moment is a significant barrier to increasing our in-person instruction, as in our current state, our systems would be overwhelmed if all of our elementary students were back. It would double the amount of time that screening was happening, reducing some of the benefit of being back by reducing the amount of in-person instructional time that folks would have, as we would have to make our way through the in-person screening. So this has definitely been one of our kind of initial challenges as we've rolled out at the beginning of the year. We, now that we, have been in our buildings, as I've said, we took some time to review the facilities data and facilities assumptions that we were working with over the summer in terms of planning for how many students and staff could be in spaces, and to kind of acknowledge our lived reality of being in those spaces and actually implementing our programs. So, there were significant concerns about our capacity to bring back all of our students given the physical distancing requirements. In particular, there are challenges associated with the 6-foot distance requirement for eating at the elementary level, as this would entail implementing a very rigid schedule of coordination to provide the required amount of space while students are eating. If all of the students were back in the classroom, there would not be sufficient space for them to do, as they're doing now, eating in the classrooms. And so that would require additional staffing for additional supervision, and would again chip away at the amount of instructional time that is available for students because of the increased transitions and management associated with that. So some of the benefit of being back in school would be diminished by the kind of increased number of transitions and spending a lot of time coming from school and interrupting the instructional day. At the high school level, our adherence to the 6-foot physical distancing requirement, as well as a limiting factor in terms of our classroom capacities at the high school level. So that's an additional challenge in terms of trying to bring back, our students, as many of our students as we can. That was some of our initial analysis of the health and facilities data. I'd like to turn it over to Barb to speak for a few minutes about some of our review of the staffing data, before we move on. So Barb.
Great, thanks. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to take you through a couple of slides on the staffing data. So staffing is one of the limitations that we tried to assess as we considered bringing back more elementary students for more days beginning in mid-October. To do this assessment, we developed a methodology for reviewing and classifying the roughly 300 requests that we've received from staff for accommodations and for flexible work arrangements. So the process we developed is being used really as a proxy for whether we believe staff would agree to be on site for more days each week, whether they would agree to manage larger groups of students each day, and whether they would agree to spend more time with students each day. So the chart that you're looking at here shows the total number of flexible work arrangement requests that we've received from elementary school staff. And we separated these requests into 3 groups, or what we're calling levels. For those categorized as level A, we anticipate a lower level of difficulty for returning to 5 days a week on site. Requests in this category include basic health and safety concerns and requests for specific PPE, and scheduling adjustments to manage childcare schedules. For those categorized as a level B, we anticipate some difficulty with returning to 5 days a week on site. This group includes the flexible work arrangement requests that would likely need to be revisited to gather more information. This group largely includes requests related to either an employee's own health risks or health risks of family members. And we can expect probably some additional requests for accommodation from this group. For those categorized as level C, we anticipate greater challenges and would expect additional requests for accommodation prior to returning to 5 days a week for on-site work. Requests in this category include things like pregnancy and postpartum requests and other ADA-related requests that would likely require additional accommodations and or further precautionary measures that we would need to put in place. So based on this analysis, we expect at least 27 members of staff who are currently working on site and are categorized at level B or C would be unlikely to return to work on site 5 days a week without some sort of additional accommodations, and could likely or potentially result in requests for a leave of absence or resignations or retirements. As we approach the end of the trimester, should we decide to return to 5 days a week of on-site school at the elementary level, we expect that there would be at least 28 additional staff members who are currently assigned to the remote academy who would have some level of difficulty returning to in-person work on site. Can you go to the next slide, Erin? Thanks. So as we're considering increasing the on-site work at our high schools, we ran the same type of staffing analysis process for employee requests for accommodation and flex work arrangements. This chart shows requests from Casco Bay, Deering, and Portland High School. So in this group, there are at least 24 employees that are categorized at a level B or C who we would expect to have some level of difficulty returning to or increasing their on-site work, and for whom we would expect that we would have to make additional accommodations with regard to them returning to work on site. Next slide, please. So the memo in the board package showed staff data for staff attendance for the first 2 weeks that students were on site, and overall our staff attendance rates were very strong. We did see an increase in absences last week. We continue to have some concerns about staff absences, particularly as we approach the cold and flu season. The majority of our buildings are fully staffed with their dedicated subs. There are a few building sites that we have seen experiencing some challenges with daily subs. We're working to onboard additional substitute staff, but the candidate pools are proving to be fairly thin, as is being experienced by all districts in Maine and across the country. If we move to a higher level of in-person learning, we can expect to see an increased need for additional support staff at both the elementary and the high school levels in order to support our health and safety protocols, student supervision during eating and transition, and to cover staff absences. These additional positions would add to the unbudgeted positions that are not covered by the CRF, the funds right now. And as of January 1st, 2021, we expect that shortfall would be in the vicinity of $365,000. Turn it back over to Erin now.
Great, thanks, Barb. So, in addition, we wanted to get some initial assessment assessment of our student participation and attendance over the first couple weeks. And despite some challenges with devices and access, in particular at our elementary level, we did see a relatively consistent attendance across our in-person and remote learning days at the elementary level. This data point indicated to us there wasn't necessarily an urgent issue regarding attendance on remote days that needed to be addressed, so gave us some level of confidence in the implementation of our hybrid model. Similarly, we've seen robust attendance at the high school level for the remote learning model, in which, as part of our shift this year from the spring, they're receiving synchronous instruction 4 days a week during those classes and seeing, significant positive attendance associated with the delivery of those courses. So, I want to acknowledge kind of here we're continuing to monitor these numbers and have been working through the support of the Bar Foundation with a couple of external consultants to build our capacity to monitor not just attendance, but engagement. One of the key lessons from the spring was that, an attendance measure alone is not sufficient to really capture what was happening for students and to inform the necessary intervention. So we're excited to have these tools soon to be effectively addressing students who, may be attending but aren't sufficiently engaging, in particular in the remote sessions. So, it's an advancement kind of building off of our learnings from the spring in terms of how to be able to more effectively monitor what's happening for students. So those tools are in development and we'll be able to utilize in the near future. Now, as we spoke about, one of the real challenges we've had and kind of one of the most novel aspects that we've tried to roll out, in our reopening plan has been the implementation of the High School Learning Center. So this model, again, was trying to thread the needle of, given what the superintendent said, initial concerns about, the full high school return and the potential for, health and safety concerns by not being able to kind of minimize student cohorts with a comprehensive high school model, but also recognizing the need for 10th through 12th grade students to have access to in-person experiences. They, as much as any of our other students, certainly need to have that access for both social emotional purposes as well as academic support. So, the Learning Center model, while we've seen, steady increases in participation as the school year has initiated, so what you see here is kind of the totals increasing from, 2.5% of the potential Learning Center opportunities being filled to almost 5% to 6.5%. And this tracks with some level of expectation that once we're getting into the year, the academic work is digging in, that more students and staff are, taking advantage of these opportunities. That being said, clearly that's not at kind of the target where we'd want to be, which is approximately 25 to 30% of the the available slots on a given day. That kind of equates to roughly a quarter of the students being accessing the Learning Center on a given day, which is our target, and I think would allow us to get to this requirement or expectation of trying to ensure that all students have at least one in-person opportunity over the course of the week. So in particular, our high school leaders and high school leadership teams have been, kind of responding to this data by developing, clearer requirements for staff around how frequently they are inviting students in and upping those numbers so that we will, in the short term, want to see a significant increase in these numbers getting closer to our targets as we move through the next few weeks of this quarter and trimester, so that, while we are continuing to work out the plans for what increased, academic learning for 10th through 12th grade students would look like, that they're still being able to take advantage of the Learning Center model in the meantime to be able to complement the synchronous instruction that they receive 4 days a week. Lastly, before I hand it back over to the superintendent, just want to summarize for a moment, some of the input that we received from principals and school nurses. First, want to recognize, all stakeholders have, important feedback and opinions about the launch of this hybrid model, and we continue to get meaningful feedback from staff, parents, and students, and we'll be utilizing a frequent, more formative survey with these groups to continue to refine and modify our hybrid implementation as we move forward. Within the context of this initial review, we wanted to gather some immediate data from our school leaders and nurses who have really been at the center of much of the launch of this work as they support their overall school communities, the staff, students and families within the schools. They've really been the nexus for this. So both groups, universally, in terms of elementary and high school leaders and elementary and high school nurses, had significant reservations about increasing the amount of in-person instruction at this time. For principals, you can see they shared, some of the concerns that I've named in our data review. And again, I think, one that is less data oriented, but I think nonetheless deserves a call out, is the last one of the recognition of kind of the physical and emotional health of getting to this place to do what we're doing, and what the experience was of the past 8 weeks to get to where we are. And so in their role in kind of holding their communities, that's something that came up for each one of them as they talked about, what the implication would be to try and move forward with increasing in-person instruction. For our nurses, they had concerns about their ability to keep up the coordination of care that they've been able to do thus far, to which we believe has supported our ability to maintain, kind of a safe and healthy school communities. With an increased population of students in the building, it just, potentially doubles that work, and makes their ability to coordinate the care, testing, follow-up, communication, to do contact tracing if that were required. All of those things become more challenging with more students at the building, thus jeopardizing our overall safety and wellness. So, given kind of the variety of these factors, and I would, offer, that any one of them, is an issue that could be addressed in isolation. I think part of my, kind of personal concern, is kind of the aggregation of challenges across a variety of, these indicators, from facilities to staffing, to the health and wellness issues, that lead us to, maintain, certainly not take any steps backward, but to maintain, the opportunities we have for the current time through the end of the trimester, while we, begin to consider what are some of these opportunities, to increase in-person instruction if we're able to maintain a positive health profile in our community and in our region as we move forward in the year. So I'll turn it back to Javier to kind of summarize and talk about our next steps to finish the presentation.
Thank you, Aaron. So I just want to recap and talk a little bit about the next steps. So in terms of what we're thinking with the pre-K-5, the decision to remain in our hybrid format in our current model was based on a number of criteria that, as you heard, focus on things like space concerns that are, potentially concerns that are going to be with us for the long haul, because that's something that, unless those requirements change, we're going to be challenged to be able to meet that requirement during meal times in particular. The other one is the staffing concerns. You heard Barb talk about the large number of staff that are currently working with flexible arrangements that would be impacted in some way if we were to return to full-time in person. So basically, some of the stability that we've been able to achieve through both our remote academy assignments as well as the different accommodations would be challenged, because we would be in a different set of scenarios with people making potentially different decisions based on that. And as you also heard, the implementation of our symptoms check as it currently stands is already taxing our staff resources and would double potentially. We are working hard to improve that process, but at the current time, it continues to be a significant challenge. One of the things that we did not touch on, but weighed heavily in this, is the additional impact of having students return from remote academy should we move to 5 days a week. There's a number of families that could potentially want to come back to in-person learning if it were available 5 days a week. And so that is something that we need to account for. Again, that has implications for staffing and also just for our capacity. As you saw in Aaron's presentation, currently we have 3 out of our 9 schools in the district that can accommodate all of the students that are currently enrolled if we were to come back 5 days a week, 3 out of 9. But that would go down to none of our schools if that actually were to include all of the students that were in remote academy. So that's an issue. And then, I think we touched on this, but I think it's a important metric that I weighed in making the decision, which is, that we've only been doing this for a short period of time with significant success at this point, and to disrupt the evolving routines as people are still in the process of establishing it seemed like it was premature. And so that was another factor that we weighed in making this decision. On the high school side, on the secondary side, the next slide, the middle school, the middle school and 9th grade, as we discussed at the time that we brought forward the recommendation, we envision that remaining in hybrid for the foreseeable future, again, based on the distancing requirement that we've established, which is that 6 feet of distancing between students. And so that is something that will be difficult to overcome at the middle school or the 9th grade. We also decided to remain in our current status for 10 through 12, again, based on the concerns, many of the same concerns that were present with pre-K-5, particularly the space and staffing concerns. And we still think that, again, it's early and we are seeing improvements in participation in the Learning Center and want to have the opportunity to continue to evolve those so that we can get to a place where, we're close to that 25% of students in Learning Center on any given day. And then we are cognizant of the fact that Portland High School at this time does not have in-person advisory, and so that is something that that is going forward, something that we need to address. And then the sort of the next steps, the things that we're looking to do, as you heard, is to reassess for pre-K-5 ahead of the trimester break. And, just to sort of be repetitive about this, we continue to be concerned about our ability to do anything in that front as long as the 6-foot requirement for distancing at meals remains in place. It will either require us to, it basically will require us to lose a whole lot of instructional time in order to be able to schedule meals in that requirement. And then, as I mentioned, we need to understand what the impact would be of having our students return from remote academy, what that would do to our school enrollment and staffing. So that is something that we are in the process of working through a way of determining what those numbers would look like and the impact. We are committed to improving the consistencies that we forecast when we came out with our plan. We understand that at this point, our activities during remote days are falling short of what our expectations and what we announced would be. And so we really do need to have a little bit of time to work on improving those consistencies and making sure that the remote day experience is more than what it currently is for students. Some of that has to do with technology. Some of that has to do with the actual assignments and activities during those days. And so that's something that we're cognizant of. And, we are looking at the possibility, if we can't return to 5 days a week, of increasing the length of the school day and or possibly using Wednesday as an in-person day. So having a staggered schedule where one Wednesday would be one cohort, the other Wednesday would be another cohort, something along those lines. So we are assessing the possibility of doing that. At the secondary levels, as I said, with 6th through 9th, we're projecting to stay in hybrid as we currently have been, for the foreseeable future. And then for grades 10 through 12, again, stronger consistency in the Learning Center and the advisory experience, and looking at other options to potentially bring more students back 10 through 12 by the end of the first quarter at Portland High School and Deering. So that would be by November 13th. So that's where we are. So I do want to make sure that I express my gratitude to all of our families for all that they are doing to help us, to help our staff make the return to in-person learning successful. We've asked a lot of students and families, and they have risen to that challenge. And so I just ask everyone to continue to work together to ensure that our students continue to have a safe and successful learning experience this fall. So I think I have one more announcement to do. Let me do that quickly. It's related to this. And then I will open it up to any questions that board members might have. And then, as Chair Rodriguez said, we also are going to take public comment on this presentation. So just before I end my report, I would like to remind families about our food security options this fall. Because of the waivers that were approved at the federal level, all meals are free for all students through December 31st of this year. For days when students are in school, all students are served breakfast. K through 8 students also get a snack. And if they wish, they also get a grab-and-go lunch. And that's available for students to take home at the end of the day. And for days when students learn remotely, grab-and-go breakfast and lunch are available for in-person and remote academy learners to pick up at the school distribution sites, which are Deering High School, Portland High School, Casco Bay, and Talbot Community Schools from 1 to 2 p.m., Monday through Friday. And at Peaks Island, they serve meals from 12:30 to 1, again, Monday through Friday. So just want to make sure that families understand that if they're unable to pick up meals for their students, they may designate another person to pick up those meals by filling out a form that we've sent to families, and is also available on site at the food distribution site, so people can come and complete that form, and then in the future, whoever they designate can come and pick up meals for them. And then they can have those meals brought back home to them, and students do not have to be present to have an adult pick up their meals for them. So that's all I have on my report, and I will turn it over to Chair Rodriguez for any questions that the board may have.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent, and thank you, Barb Stoddard and Assistant Superintendent Aaron Townsend for the presentation. I will open it up for board member questions and discussion first, and then after that, I will open it up to the public to hear their comments on the presentation that we just had. So if any board member has questions, please use the raise your hand feature, and I'll call to you in order. We'll start with Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a couple quick questions. Can you elaborate a little bit more, Superintendent, in regards to when we use the 3-foot versus the 6-foot?
Yeah, the CDC, the Maine CDC requirements for guidance for schools is that that 6 feet is ideal and 3 feet is required. And the 3 feet is required if if other mitigation factors are in place. So if masks are worn, if air is circulating, and all of the other requirements are in place. The guidance does specify that for adult students, that 6 feet should be preserved. So we've interpreted that, and I will grant you that it is the most conservative approach and the most conservative interpretation, as meaning that any of our students who are in secondary school, so middle school and high school, that we should preserve that 6 foot social distancing.
And when on the presentation you said November 13th, first quarter, first trimester evaluation for the high school, do we anticipate, I know you don't have a crystal ball, obviously, that staffing will change? We already have challenges in regards to having substitutes lined up. Do we have a feeling that, even feeling, come November 13th, that even our numbers will improve to have people come back? Or I'm just curious about that, if when we were going to reevaluate, if that's going to even still be, it'll still be an issue at that time too, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Aaron, do you want to take that?
Yeah, what I would say is we, with the high school leadership, we're working through kind of a sequence of steps to have a plan to essentially to run all that to the ground, I guess I would say, so that we know what we can do on the 13th and we're not evaluating at the 13th. So, each of the high schools is doing stakeholder surveys right now of staff, students, and parents. So those are being rolled out this week. And then working through, and it's kind of like a combination of the facilities, the staffing, and the program variables to identify what we could offer in terms of in-person instruction. So we will be working through those over the next couple of weeks so that we have a viable option in place if our health data indicates that we can move forward at that time. So we'll, as Barb indicated, there are a number of potential staffing challenges around that. And given, the kind of specialized nature of high school with credentials and departmentalization, that has the potential to impact programmatic offerings. And all of that then results into, what kind of schedule we can offer and the size of sections, and brings us back to facilities. So, but those are just problems to work through. Seems like we should, Oscar will be helpful in this, in the way Derek framed it, but we'll move through to have, a proposal of what that could look like, starting from the place of what could it look like to have a 10th through 12th grade hybrid model similar to, our pre-K through 9 program. But it's, given the limitations we've named, it's not 100% clear we'll be able to fully get there, but to have some offering on the table for 10, 12 in-person instruction if, the health conditions warrant.
So I guess I have another question. So facility-wise, I had gotten a message from the management at Italian Heritage Center saying that they had received word that we were looking for space. I hadn't quite heard that request, that we had put out any kind of request for space, but they had offered up the Italian Heritage Center, and I'm not sure, again, logistics or anything of that nature, but there's some conversation about we talk about outdoor classrooms, but when we talk about on-site, does on-site have to be in the classroom, or are there partners where we could do potentially core classes? I know that we have the challenges still with, someone's taking an honors class of this or an AP of this, but is there a way, I know that you guys have turned over, but is there any kind of way that we have any partners in the community where we could do on-site, but not on-site at Portland High School or Darien High School? Just trying to explore, like we did for outdoor learning, if there's other possibilities for that.
We'll continue to look at those options. I think you understand the complexity of, a high school schedule and, what site, what classes would be held at the Italian Heritage Center or any other off-site, and then how would you get to your next class and things along those lines. So we will continue to look at all of those options.
Okay, thank you. And the down 24, I had a question about that. I wrote an arrow with a down arrow of 24, and I know that was around staffing that Barb had. So that 24 down, I think it was 24 down at the high school level that could not go back because of they were in the more challenging levels. So that 24, I would assume, presents great challenges for the high school. I don't know what the total staffing is at each of the high schools, but could you talk a little bit about that, Barb? I know you covered it mostly, but.
Well, so what I'll say is, we made an assessment. We have not talked to staff individually. So I can't necessarily say that those specific 13 or 11 people would or would not come back, but we, based on what their request was, we made an assessment of how challenging we thought it would be for them to make a decision to come back. And so that's really what those numbers reflect.
So with the survey that's going out, that will have some sort of reevaluation as well with staff as to how they're feeling at this time, or is it strictly for parents and students?
Well, Aaron could probably address that better than I could in terms of...
Yeah, I mean, each that is more about kind of programmatically. It won't address the accommodations or flexible work arrangements. Those by nature are all individualized kind of back and forth conversations about each, as required, by ADA for medical accommodations, but also has been kind of our practice with the flexible work arrangements. So the determination kind of as we envision what the potential model could be of returning students to in-person instruction, and that's more what the survey gets at, is like, what could this look like? Then there'll be a process, as I named, to work through each of the individual conversations in partnership with the HR team to say, okay, this is what we're proposing, effectively. Can you do this, right? Can you not? And what would be the implication one way or the other, given what we would be proposing.
So would we do outreach? I'm trying to understand when the 24 or more, when would we do the outreach prior to the November 13th, where that's just about a month away, to outreach to them again to say, to get a temperature, I guess, as to how they're feeling. And if we were to go back November 12th, do we reevaluate numbers? I'm just curious about that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that process will begin here over the next couple of weeks, so that by the time we hit the end of October, we've had some engagement. We have, kind of a vision of what the model could be, have had conversations on the staffing side so that we can manage kind of those complexities of staffing, facilities, program, so that we could be prepared by the 13th.
Okay. And just last, the budget deficit, Barb, that you talked about, the $365,000 post January 1st. That's because all the money needs to be spent prior to January 1st. And there's no other, I know that we don't have any hidden pots of gold or anything, but that obviously there's no funds that we could allocate differently, obviously, because our budget is already very tight.
Just to remind you that is $365,000 in addition to what we're currently looking at, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million, of which we think we can offset about $1.5 million.
Okay.
So this would be added to the potential services and staffing and activities that we would need to eliminate come January 1st.
Okay. So after that date, I'm sorry if I missed it because I had to keep going off the screen here for a little bit. Did you mention the total outside of staffing? You said the 365. Do we know a total figure at this time that we're anticipating post?
Yeah, so it's about $4 million plus right now that we expect that we will need to that we have committed that we will not be able to pay for starting January 1st. And, so that is that's the next challenge. The way that I've been describing this to people is, now we're in the process of trying to figure out how to spend all of this additional money, given very tight restrictions around what you can use it for and so on. Then we will have the challenge of trying to decide what we're able to maintain in the second half of the year versus what we will have to reduce. And, so again, there's a significant, $4 million and, Miranda's initial assessment of where are other places that we can save showed that there might be about $1.5 million worth of expenses that we could redirect to carry that over. And then, if that continues to play itself out, that means that we would have to reduce $2.5 million worth of programs and services that we've established, with the state CRF funding that we would need to reduce. So it's very daunting, to sort of say the least.
And there's no indication from the state that they're going to extend that date. Is that a federal date that the state has been given? Okay.
That's correct. That's federal. It's federal money, and those are the federal requirements.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. We'll go to Mr. Atkinson.
Thank you, Chair. First, I just wanted to comment, Superintendent, you mentioned that this has been a challenge and coming back to school during a pandemic has been a challenge for families. I just want to recognize that this has been a really big challenge for staff in the schools, and in addition to you and your team, Javier, keeping up with all of the changes and the remaking of the school district in this year. So I wanted to say that before I ask my next question, which is one that I've gotten from a couple of constituents around the shorter school day that we're doing this year, and the release at lunchtime, with a bagged lunch. That's the experience for the students in the hybrid mode when they're on in an in-person day. And I wonder if you could just briefly remind folks what the challenges were around maintaining the full school day, and what that afternoon time is being used for by staff in their sort of keeping up with the challenges of this year.
And so there are generally three reasons why we did that. One was to reduce the length of time that students would be exposed to each other, and teachers would be exposed to students. So again, this is, sort of it's a part of rationale. And so, the science seems to suggest that, the more time that you are around somebody who is infected, the sort of the severity of your viral load increases. So that was one reason. The other reason has to do with our transportation rotation. And so our ability to bring students to school, given the limitations on how many people can travel in a bus at a time, has us, as you know, staggering our schedules so that we've got, half of the schools, on an early entrance, half of the schools on a more traditional entrance, and then our middle schools have moved to what is, a fairly late start. For us to extend the day just means that, particularly on the back end for our middle school students, the dismissal would get pushed back by whatever that additional time that we build into the schedule would be. So, if it's an hour, right now we're at, basically a 5-hour day as opposed to 6.5-hour day. So say we extended it by an hour, that would push the middle school dismissal until after 4. And so that's fairly late for staff. It's fairly late for students, particularly as we come into the winter. And then the last reason is more of a programmatic one, and I think I've referenced in my discussion about some of the things that we need to do at the pre-K-5 level, and that's to improve the consistency of what happens during the remote day. One of the reasons that we shortened the day was to ensure that our staff had a substantive period of time during the day where they would be able to connect with and, provide instruction, review work and provide feedback to students who are assigned to them but are on remote on that particular day. So during an A day, for them to be able to check in with their cohort B students, for them on a cohort B day to be able to check in with their cohort A students. And so, giving them the additional time where they could, actually have that meaningful engagement with students was another one of the reasons why we have that shortened school day. So, to the extent that we've heard from families that the remote day experience is not actually have that level of consistency across the district, that is something that Assistant Superintendent Alley and Assistant Superintendent Townsend are working with our building leaders to really understand what those consistencies are, how they are looking and how they're applied right now, and trying to get to to a stronger level of consistency around that.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. We'll go to Ms. Bondo.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I just want to acknowledge the commitment and the hard work that the team is doing, because it's a big challenge for all of us, and we know then it's not easy to go through all the management right now with the pandemic. So I have a few questions, and I think some of my questions Ms. Thompson already asked about it, so I get a couple questions. And I have here on the screening response, and I heard Mr. Thompson mention about communication with parents, multilingual parents. So I wonder about what kind of improvement we can, what kind of strategy actually has been built behind them to improve the screening response, because we need to be able to hold parents accountable for that, because those are the first major keys for in-person before to come to school. So what we have done already to improve the communication with parents?
So I'll address that first, and then Grace, if you would like to jump in, feel free to do that. So first, we are challenged always to be able to communicate effectively with our very diverse community. People have multiple ways that they prefer to be communicated with, and logistical challenges both in terms of access to some of the traditional means that we use to communicate, and ability to to sort of to understand what we're saying. So I think first was really understanding the scope of the problem, and so we have now narrowed it down to about 1,000 students who currently do not receive either an email or have opted into the text messaging for us. And we've analyzed what the composition of that group is. And we are now in the process of establishing a set of interventions to speak directly to those families. So we've done numerous outreach efforts. Even in yesterday's parent and community newsletter, you may have seen that there was another reminder for people to access, to how they could go about getting access to the text messages. Once we actually have people receive that, it's a fairly straightforward and simple, process to do. But it's, there are a couple issues that come into play. One is, 1,000 people that don't get it, and then a significant number of people that do get it and don't respond, or respond after it's useful. So, they complete it once, as their kid is arriving at school or on the bus or something along those lines. And by then lists are printed and those students are being, it's adding to the volume of students that need to be screened by our staff as they come to the school. So, we know exactly who the students are now who are consistently not getting those emails, and we're working with our IT team and with our multilingual team to reach those students directly. Just to sort of put it in context, about 60% of the families that don't receive our email or our texts are families of EL students, either current or past EL students. So I think that that gives you an idea that it's a significant part of the population. I think Mr. Townsend talked about the fact that in the schools that have the higher EL populations where we have the lowest response rates.
All right, thank you.
And Grace, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I just wanted to say that they are not receiving the email, Ms. Bonda, because they do not have emails. And so that's another thing that we are trying to organize as soon as families enter us through registration, to set them up, help them in creating their own Gmail account.
That's right.
And, and create that so that then they can get all kinds of communications, because in general, schools communicate via email.
Email. Okay. All right. Thank you, Grace. My second question is on the Learning Center. When I look at the attendance, this is hurting. And I don't know, do we know the reason why? Because we just get the data. The attendance I see on the virtual and on the in-person is low. So do we have any idea the reason? Is it because the less interest, or is not mandatory, or because when we see some requirement here, maybe building some strategy to increase some required sessions. And I think before to do so, we need to know exactly why the attendance is too low. Do we have any idea, Ms. Thompson?
Yep. So, well, one, that's part of the students is to help understand more deeply some of that. So that's one of the steps to be able to but even preceding that, we're aware of a few challenges. One is, one that students have named is transportation, in terms of coming and, whether, coming for a session or coming for multiple. So, so that's one that's been named. And so that's part of the consideration of, whether we have students come in for just the whole afternoon as opposed to just one of the, the learning centers kind of generally broken into 3 45-minute blocks, so that students can have access to different teachers or for different courses. And so, the challenges of getting there potentially for just one of those sessions may not seem worth it, right, is kind of what we've heard from kids. So that's one of the challenges. So trying to account for that in the planning. The other is, I think, there was some natural just like getting started. They have new courses, new teachers, in building relationship, and teachers knowing who they need to have come in, students, just kind of the academic load increasing and kind of feeling the need to come in, is definitely some. And I think we, start to see some initial increases just as a result of, as a result of being in week 3 of school and school getting more challenging and difficult and students wanting more support and teachers identifying who needs to come in. So, so those things, were some of the initial kind of pieces that were challenging some of the implementation. And it's a, it's a new model in terms of what the expectation is for kids. And so kind of a transition to that. And I think, it was something we were aware of kind of coming in, but we're hesitant to be too aggressive because we didn't want to have too many kids, right, challenging kind of our capacity. But we've recognized now, having a stronger set of expectations in terms of bringing students in and, kind of requiring those sessions is part of the approach that we want to have moving forward. So those are some of the initial kind of, informal feedback and kind of data as we've been, checking in with kids and trying to understand what's happening. And the survey will be another added component to that as we continue to try and accelerate the increase in learning centers we'd envisioned.
Okay, right. I have two more last questions. So my third one is on the remote learning. I see the outcomes is just based on the attendance, and it's not about engagement or student participation testing, because the success of the remote academy should be based mostly on the engagement. We can see, because students can attend, but if the engagement and the participation and involvement to the curriculum, we don't see the success on the remote. So you talk about, if I remember, you talk about some other grant that we had to try to improve some other assessment for the engagement. So do you know the time frame for that? Because there's something that I just worry about, that remote learning is the best quality of our learning process for our students. So my concern is that more we waiting to assess those engagement, are we putting our student in risk to have a less quality curriculum and impacting to the learning process?
Well, I'd say, just as last spring, our teachers, kind of on the front lines are doing that kind of assessment, daily, right? Particularly, and Malia can speak to the remote academy part of it, but even in the hybrid model on the remote, monitoring what students are doing. Certainly in the hybrid model, we're able to intervene when they come back into school, given that we, have high attendance rates for the in-person portion of the day. So I don't want to say that it's not being monitored now, right? What the grant will allow us to do is to just have a more consistent, robust data set to add to those efforts that teachers and schools are already undertaking, right? We struggled last spring, if you'll remember, we could name what our attendance rate was, but we weren't able to report a more precise figure of kind of levels of engagement. And that's what we're striving to be able to do, not just for reporting purposes kind of system-wide, but to be able to feed data back to teams to make sure that they're providing the interventions for the students who are disengaged and nobody's slipping through the cracks. So, I think it's a complementary effort in terms of establishing that data system, but that's part of what teachers are doing on the daily in terms of monitoring who's engaging, what's happening, and kind of the steps. And certainly, there was a lot of learning about how to intervene and support kids in those ways, from our spring experience. So. We finished phase 1 of the project in terms of detailing it. We're working with establishing essentially, some kind of tech support to build out the reporting dashboard feature of it. So we've kind of outlined all of the data flows, and it connects to some of our implementation of the learning systems, Seesaw and Google Classroom, that'll be able to help us track activity so that we can see kind of when kids are going dark and not engaging at all in any of the kind of tools and academic work we're putting forward. But I think informally, and that's happening, daily by teachers and students. So don't want to, give the impression that some of those interventions are not already taking place.
Okay, that's good to know. My last question is I think it's Barbara, I think if I get my notes right, we have some opening on the teachers, the full-time.
I'm sorry, Mickey, I can't hear you.
Mickey, we lost your audio.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Yep, you're back on.
Did you hear my question, Bob?
No, about teacher vacancies, is that what you were asking?
Yes. Yeah, because we have some vacancy on the English learner teachers for the full-time. We were able to fill those spaces for the ELL teachers?
They're full. There's one potential opening, but they're not sure that they're going to fill it, but everything is full.
And on the special ed teachers?
We are in the midst of hiring one. We just had a resignation.
Okay. All right. So thank you so much. So I'm all done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo. We're going to Ms. Victor.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I just want to start by acknowledging and commending all of the staff on this call and across the district for how much we have achieved reopening school for all of our students in some capacity, whether hybrid, remote, and I think for our elementary school students, seeing kids, I live a block from Reiki School, and seeing kids, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday out there playing on the playground, it has brought our community back to life. And with my elementary school student and my middle school student, I know that their being in school 2 days a week has given them has brought back some sense of normalcy to their lives. And I think the fact that we've been able to do that and to do it safely in the middle of a pandemic is just an extraordinary accomplishment. And it has been a Herculean task, and and continues to be so in terms of the complexity that I know continues to challenge us day in and day out. So I just wanted to acknowledge all that's been achieved and to thank everyone so much. I have two main questions tonight, and one is I'm just not sure I have clarity now on the status for elementary school students trying to get English language learners in school 4 days a week, those that are on the hybrid model. So I was wondering, I was wondering if there could be an update on that. I think because of staffing challenges, we weren't able to have those kids join 4 days a week initially. So it'd be great to hear where that stands.
Malia, would you like to?
Yeah, I can. Oh, I see Carlos just popped on. I'll start, and Carlos, you know all the detail, or do you want to just go ahead yourself?
Sure, I can jump in, Malia, if that's all right.
Okay, sure.
So we do have the bulk of our schools with 4 days in person with with ILD students. We are running up against a challenge in terms of staffing and spacing, as you've seen in other areas, and been working with the schools that have specific staffing and spacing challenges to see what we can do to support them to get to 4 days instruction. All schools have 4-day instruction except currently East End, Presumpscot, Lyseth, and King, I believe. So we're working on expanding that to a few other schools starting next week on the 13th to be able to have most of our schools on 4-day in person.
And I would just add that that was our original plan based on the work group's great thinking this summer. And then, of course, like with everything in our plan, we started to experience, the complexities of operationalizing the concepts in theory. But the thing we're holding on to is the intent behind that plan, which was to provide additional support, time, attention, energy for these students. And so in the case that we are not able to do that in an in-person setting, the schools are developing plans for what it will look like to deliver that additional time, attention, and support, both in terms of their language development and in terms of how they're accessing the remote learning that happens on the remote learning days in a remote way, while simultaneously collaborating with community partners when those families need that childcare piece of it as well, to make sure that students would be set up to get that remote support from their EL teacher in a community partner setting if that's ultimately what's going to work better. So I just wanted to make sure that's clear too, that we're continuing to center our goal and our intention behind that, even in cases where it's going to look a little bit different from the initial concept that we had.
Great, thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Can I ask something just to be clarified? When we were talking about the 4 days a week, just so that I'm clear on this, we're talking about the IELD students, not all of our ELL students. I just want to make sure that folks know that the difference of how many kids we're talking about.
Yeah,
correct.
Sorry, I wasn't more specific there. Yes. My second question is with respect to 10th through 12th graders. I would love some clarity, both with respect to the in-person advisory and the Learning Center, in terms of what specifically we're trying to achieve. So first, with the in-person advisory, my understanding was that when we passed the plan during the summer, that at that time, the expectation was that all 3 high schools would have in-person advisories. And so I'm wondering, was that not the case, and how did that get lost and kind of as we rolled out the plan? And then just confirming that the goal is for Portland High to have an in-person advisory, an opportunity for kids to come in and have an advisory or crew or something where they're coming together and having that opportunity to connect together in person. And second, with respect to the learning centers, what I hear, I understand that it's evolving, but what are we trying to get it to? What is the goal of what it looks like?
So just in respect to the advisory, the goal and the commitment in the initial reopening plan that at least one of the advisory sessions, because each school has 2 to 3 advisories a week, but at least one would be in person. Currently, Deering and Casco Bay are meeting that mark, and Portland High, as Javier indicated, is on the way. Challenge for Portland High, has been, that their schedule was not originally designed to facilitate that, and there have been some staffing challenges. But the number of in-person seminar, is how they refer to it at Portland High, numbers have been increasing as as we've moved through these first couple of weeks. So we're on the trajectory to meet that goal by working through some of those initial challenges. But so that's where we stand on the advisory side. On the Learning Center, in terms of what the goal is, I guess I would say the goal is to be able to provide additional academic, primarily in the Learning Center time, academic support for students, and to support them in their core content classes. So in terms of participation from the goal, again, we're looking to try and have in an in-person environment, and that, prioritizing the in-person, though virtual does remain an option, to have, approximately 25% of the student body kind of present for that. So I think there are different ways that schools are trying to organize that, whether it's, Casco Bay uses kind of building off their culture and history of their crew model, has just organized it so it is just a grade per day. So each grade level has a day, but that's unique, that isn't then tied directly necessarily to their academic courses. So don't want to, conflate. None of the high schools are providing their core academic courses. All 3 are providing it, via the remote learning model. And just that in-person time is kind of more of an extension of their crew, and they call it team time. Deering is, kind of considering trying that, but is also looking at increasing kind of the requirements around the number of sessions that teachers are hosting and how they're helping to identify students for those, and that's similar to the Portland High model. So they've been working with their leadership teams to evaluate whether at the comprehensive high schools, the most effective way to organize that, would be by period, by content area, by discipline. So they're trying different things in terms of that. But again, our staffing thing continues to kind of be a challenge around some of that in terms of some of the flexible work arrangements, that a number of staff have, where it was, initially established that they're doing just, the remote other than the in-person advisory. And so there's limitations that they, continue to navigate to try and meet that goal. But I think, from a purpose standpoint, is to be able to complement their virtual instruction with some additional in-person academic support, both for students who are struggling with the work or just need a different kind of engagement to master whatever the content may be, be that ranging from, any of our National Merit Scholar finalists, right, who are needing support with advanced coursework, or students who are, participating in some of our, other kind of entry-level coursework. And then from a participation standpoint, where our goal is to be at about 25 to 30%, which roughly would account for kind of a grade level's worth of students, plus a few more on any given day.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Victor. Let's go to Ms. Morioni.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy I waited because the majority of my questions were asked already by my fellow board members, and I do want to echo what Ms. Victor said about kudos and recognizing the success of a couple of things. We're doing it. We're still open. We are having a hybrid that seems to be so far successful. Granted, we're still in a pandemic and we're all in it together, and it's not going away anytime soon, it doesn't seem, but yet we are keeping our kids safe and healthy as best we can. And we again have still in-person learning happening, which again, knock on wood, will continue for a long, long time. I'm looking at this in a much different lens around, and I've talked to the superintendent about this as well. I don't see our kids as falling behind. I think all of it, if we had a pause button on history right now, and we could all say, where are we and what we did, we'll reflect back, hopefully, and look at a different metrics of what our students are learning. And I think they're learning things like flexibility, resiliency, caring for one another, and again, our community, and looking at patience, because we all, I think, if we can work better to be kind and patient in this process, the better we'll all be. And so I think at the end of the day, when our kids leave again this year or whatever long it takes, those will be the key life skills they'll be taking with them, whether or not they know their algebra or whether or not, biology, whatever. To me, I really don't. Honestly, I would love it if we could just say academics is one thing, but keeping our kids with these, again, soft skills will take them much further in life, I think. So maybe it's getting an older age or something, but I feel like I'm thinking about things in that regard. But I also just want to say thank you to all of our staff and the hard work. It just amazes me, really, it does. And I just want to, it also shines a light right now on those 1,000 students that we can't reach or can't engage with as well as we want to be. And that's important. Thank you for recognizing that and noticing, what, and coming up with a quick plan to address that with our ELL staff and Grace and Assistant Superintendent Townsend. Thank you so much for making sure we're shining that light and working to help those students, along with all of our other students, of course. I think the only question I had was, as I was prioritizing, again, safety, wellness, health right now, looking at wellness, how are particularly our high school students that are in remote learning, how are we making sure that they are staying well, mentally well? I mean, I know we have our social emotional learning work, and I know we've gotten updates around that. But if I'm a 10th grader and I'm online every day and I'm feeling really down and depressed and really need someone to talk to, how are we making sure that they have outlets and connections with their high school contacts if they need it, or how are we making sure that they have that level of foundation still in place?
So, I mean, we'll acknowledge, and again, part of why, we, in the ideal world, we want to prioritize, in-person learning so you can monitor those things a little more directly with the eyeballs. But some of the same structures in terms of referral to our social workers and other supports when staff is, noticing, folks are disengaged or indicating concern in that regard. I would say it was also part of why the priority, and, I think our schools in particular are, recognized Deering and Portland for taking steps forward in their model around, advisory, whatever it's called at the given school, that intentionally, that was one of the primary recommendations out of our planning this summer, given that need that we needed to have that kind of contact and prioritize that level of kind of social emotional contact and monitoring. So that's another structure that's intentionally designed to kind of support what you're naming. At some of the schools, they have the intervention structures, at Portland High, they're called the early warning indicator. They do weekly meetings to identify students who are of concern and refer them, as I said, to either social worker or counselors for additional check-ins or additional follow-up from teachers on their teams. Both Deering and Casco have similar, kind of student intervention structures. So those are a few of the things that, kind of monitoring. And then, as we've rolled out, again, part of why we've, want to expand the learning center opportunities, right? So that there can just be the actual contact to kind of get them out of their rooms and their homes, and why we have followed the MPA guidance to be able to facilitate the kinds of athletic and co-curricular opportunities that give just students other opportunities to connect. So I know our fall sports season is up and running. The co-curriculars are getting off the ground as well, so that there are a variety of kind of opportunities and for students to connect beyond just kind of their academic coursework.
Great. Thank you for that reminder. And I just have one more question. And there was on the news today about Abbott Labs having rapid tests, and there's going to be a rollout of these rapid tests. And I'm curious for the superintendent, with the money that we did get for the CARES Act, if we'll have any additional funds if we decided to do any type of rapid testing of students going into the buildings. I mean, do we have any additional funds that we could use before December 31st to purchase rapid tests if you decided to go that route?
I don't think that the money would be the impediment. I do think that the ability to do that at scale is something that would be challenging, particularly after December 31st, because any staffing that would need to be in place in order to be able to do that would no longer be sustainable. I do think that we have made tremendous progress on the testing front. So I think, both, we have a district level clinic that we can use for testing any symptomatic students. We have an arrangement with a local healthcare provider to be able to provide mass testing on site if we were to be in a situation where we had an outbreak. So we have the ability to do that. And the state is currently scaling up their ability to provide the rapid testing on site. And we did sign on to that. But again, that is all for symptomatic students. So we are not at this point looking at doing any level of surveillance testing or things along those lines in the same way that, I know some of the universities are able to do.
And one final question was around, in your slides, you'd mentioned about if students who are doing remote come back to in-person, is there a plan for that, a date for that? Can families choose to do that? Is there a certain time that they would have to choose to do that?
So we had said all along that would be at the trimester break. So that would be, in December, so December 4th for our elementary schools. And we are currently in the process of rolling out our plan for getting feedback from families on that. And part of that is, making sure that we are able to define what would be available to them if they came back to school. So what kind of changes would we make to our program, extended day, extending the school hours, the Wednesday option that I discussed earlier, so being able to define what that is, and then getting a sense from how many families, would be interested in coming back, because that would then, have tremendous, sort of domino effects in terms of staffing, as well as in terms of the numbers of students that would be in our schools.
Thank you, Superintendent. Just want to clarify the date, December 4th. Okay, thank you.
By December 4th, well ahead of December 4th, we would like to be in the position of saying, how many people are coming back, because we can't wait until December 4th to then make decisions about people, about staff and things along those lines. So,
great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Morioni. Let's go to Mr. Balfons.
Thank you. Superintendent, we've received emails during this hybrid time about people having issues with computers. Just want to see if there's an update on, acquiring computers and getting them out to students.
Yeah, that is continues to be a significant challenge for us. We did a lot of computer distribution in the spring with all of the, with all of our inventory, which was essentially we took apart the computer labs that we had in school, so laptop carts, and redeployed those out to our students and families who needed them. So we did a lot of that. In doing that, we used up our supplies. So we, that was it. We ordered at the end of the year with some of the money that we were able to save because we didn't, do other things. We ordered 500 additional laptops, which are scheduled to arrive in a couple of, anything from a couple of days to a couple of weeks. So we are about to get an additional, 500 laptops, which we will prioritize to get everybody that needs technology at the remote academy level, the laptops that they need, and then to begin to plug holes in the pre-K through 5 students who don't currently have devices on, for their remote days. We also are about to deploy about 200 devices that the state made available to us for pre-K students, so tablets. So those are, ready to roll any day now. So we're making headway with that. We have a very large order that we also placed in the summer once we knew that the funding from the DOE was going to be available. So that large order, which will allow us to, not only obviously meet our one-to-one needs where they are not currently met, but also refresh our inventory. So put us all on a common platform and have, devices. One of the challenges that we're facing right now is all of our high school devices and all of our middle school devices, places where we are one-to-one, are all with, computers that are at the last, in the last year of their useful life cycle. So in fact, our high school Chromebooks, we extended for a year deliberately because we thought that they could make it through another year, but obviously those devices are not as reliable as they once were, and so we're having a higher number of devices having to come back to be for repairs and for chargers and things along those lines. So once that order arrives, which is now scheduled for November, that, just to remind folks, was originally scheduled to arrive in mid-October, and last week it was pushed back to November. Once that arrives, we will be able to, be in a much better place, because everybody who currently has either no device or a device that's at the end of its useful life will get a brand new device. So we do have strategies that probably we could go into, but will take a long time to sort of, we have some new staff devices that just arrived. As those staff devices get handed out to staff and we recover their old devices, we'll use those to plug some of the holes, some of the broken computers, some of the, families that are currently using, three kids have a single device and things along those lines. So we have a good understanding of where our holes are. We have lists of who does not have devices, and we, we're triaging who gets the priorities on those fronts.
Thank you.
I think it's really important for people to understand, and so I appreciate the question, that we are at the front of the line in terms of getting these devices. We were as aggressive as we possibly could be, having recovering funds from FY 20 and using that to purchase 500 laptops that we're about to receive. That order was placed on July, like the first week in July, and we're about to receive those devices. The devices that have now been pushed off into November, before we actually had approval from the state, we ordered those devices on just the knowledge that if we didn't get to the front of the line, that we would never get those devices in time. And we're grateful that we have the money and that we've been able to prioritize that, and that they are on their way, but unfortunately not as quickly as we would have wanted to have them. But this is a common problem if you read the educational literature that everybody is facing across the country, definitely in Maine as well.
Thank you, Mr. Balfans. Let's go to Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Superintendent. I want to express my deep gratitude. No one's gotten sick with COVID-19 in the district, and no one has died, and those were the two circumstances that tormented me throughout our discussions of exploring how we were going to do school this fall. And that's because of the diligent work that's happened in the district, as well as the cooperation of our families. So thank you to everybody here in Portland for making that be the story of our first few weeks. I want to acknowledge the heroic efforts that it took to make this happen, and that those efforts have a toll on the people in the district, not least of which is our central office team. And I want to acknowledge that you all annually get beat up during our budget season for being something other than essential to the success of our students and district. And I think if ever there was a time to see that to be other than the case, it's now. It's also very much because of our custodial staff, our food service staff, our administrators, teachers, and other educational professionals. So just thank you, each and every one of you. I want to acknowledge that in addition to the viral pandemic, we continue to be confronted with the pandemic of systemic racism. We are far from having a mobilized response that we also need to dismantle the systems of racism and white supremacy as a district and as a state and as a country. And that's even despite the heightened awareness that we have nationally and locally of the deadly effects of racism and white supremacy. But nonetheless, I want to highlight a few things that I understand are underway in the district, in addition to all the work that are part of our equity work that's been discussed at length at a previous board meeting, and this will lead me to a question. So first, I want to acknowledge that in response to the collection of reports of racial and sexual harassment that were brought forth this past June, that spanned approximately a decade of student experience, that the superintendent has been leading an investigation and will bring forth a report to the board in the near future. that we will be having a workshop this evening on an updated harassment policy, the work on which began prior to those June reports, but it's very much related. We've just begun the very beginning of work on a district equity policy. And as highlighted tonight, equity has been at the center of our school plans this fall, including the additional staffing that we've hired to better support some of our students that have been most marginalized. So my question is, as we seek to address the opportunity gap that's created by systemic racism, I'm curious how we already are, or how we might better coordinate with others who share this focus and values and already have funding and staff to support our students through their own programs beyond child care.
So first of all, I'll start by acknowledging that we are, I am challenged by this every day, cognizant of the fact that we do have, as you described, a twin pandemic, and, one is fairly new and the other one is, at least 400 years old. And that the 400-year-old one is the one that we were prioritizing prior to the brand new one, and the brand new one has significantly curtailed our capacity to sort of be battling on those two fronts as well as we would like. So, I do think, I think I understand your question. We have, prioritized trying to ensure that we provide supports to those families that, are confronting the new pandemic while also having lived with the 400-year-old one. So everything that we've talked about in terms of, our English language learners, our immigrant families, in prioritizing their needs as we've looked at, bringing students back to school. I think that has been front and center in our efforts. We've worked with community organizations primarily around the child care issues because, one, we believe that is, it's a reality in the new pandemic and, an outgrowth of the way that our society is structured, where it makes, many of our families who have the least be the families that are also essential workers and do not have the flexibility and the options that some of us have and some other families have to be able to, work around a different schedule. So that is the area where we have prioritized our efforts. And, we are open to other options for working with other families and working with other organizations to support the needs of our families. But I can't give you many examples of places where that is, sort of jumps out to me, where we have those opportunities, and we continue to be interested in those and looking for options to do that work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Great. I've long slate of questions. I think they covered a lot of the things that I had written down to get clarification. I guess the only, I think it was, I'm sorry, I can't recall who. It was Ms. Thompson. One of the first questions when she asked about using spaces outside of our campuses for classes. I'm wondering on the other side, because her question was specifically about high school, but I'm wondering on the younger side of our instruction, like childcare facilities around town that we could partner with to offer more slots, and more specifically focus on the, the pre-K through 5 reopening and using other spaces. Anything you can add to that, Amir?
I will, I'll say that we are, as I said to Ms. Thompson's question, we're interested in exploring all of those options. Ms. Valenzuela and I, Dr. Valenzuela and I talked about that today as we were looking to expand our community partnerships. What are some of the other sites that we would be able to mobilize that we could use for, drop-in centers and things along those lines as a way that we would be able to provide additional resources for families during those remote days. So, we actually talked about the Italian Heritage Center, as well as some of the city facilities, the expo, and even our high school gyms as a possible location for doing some of those things.
Absolutely, yeah, and I appreciate that. I remember when you and I spoke last week talking about community spaces, libraries, gyms, and all these areas are things that you're exploring. Not so much a comment not as much a question as a comment, but something else that we hear a lot are comparisons of other nearby districts whose high school students have returned to full-time instruction. And I just want to point that the board is aware that you and most superintendents of the area are in constant communication so that or at least have some idea of what other districts are doing. I'm sure you're busy enough running this district, so you don't have details about what other ones are doing. But the reason I bring that up is just to highlight that it's not that you're against the idea of accomplishing this, but rather that our challenges to getting it done are really preventing us from doing it. And I think today we were able to explore those, or rather dive into those the details of those challenges. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the public comment. Before I do that, I want to go over the public comment rules. And while I look them up, just remind folks that want to address the board that I would like to limit comments specifically to the presentation around the decision to reopen school, and comments about things or topics other than this one. We will have our usual public comment section at the end of our agenda. When I call you, members of the audience or the public that want to address the board can use the raise your hand feature on Zoom, which I'm looking for my, spiel. Here we go. I could use the raise your hand feature provided by Zoom. This feature is either found on the webinar control bar at the bottom of your screen, or can be found by selecting your name on the participant screen. Once I call your name, you will have 3 minutes to address the board. I'll ask you to please start with your name and address. When you get close to the end of the 3 minutes, I'll try to politely interrupt you. And if you need additional time, we'll grant another minute, at the end of which I will probably mute your microphone. So having said that, I'll open it up to public comment. And the first person on the list is Linda Braley. And I just need, Anne, if you're hosting, can you give speaking permission or talking permission?
Greg is on it. Yep.
Excellent. Linda, can you hear us?
I think she has to be unmuted.
Yeah, I cannot do it because I'm not hosting.
I just unmuted myself, sorry. I'm looking for the email I just sent everybody because I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to stay on the call. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, yeah. So I'll go ahead and start the timer if you don't mind giving us your name and address first.
Sure, that's fine. My name is Linda Braley and I'm at 44 Edward Street. My son is a junior at Portland High School. I just wanted to clarify, he was explaining to me, there was a question earlier about the Learning Center in the afternoon and why that's not been so successful. And from his perspective, he said that it's difficult to get there, both because taking public transportation, if the school's not open, it's hard to ask kids to get on a bus. And not everybody has access to a vehicle, or parents are working and can't transport them. But there's also, in his case, junior seminar, which happens at 1:15 for a certain period of time. And then he also has sports in the afternoon that he has to get to. So the travel time, so essentially it's trying to shoehorn it in. But independent of any of that is really that he said you have to sign up 24 hours in advance to be able to do it. And with the daily class, by the time you actually are there to address the challenge you're facing, this class has moved on. So the delay makes it difficult to actually make it productive. So that was just a clarification from him I thought I would share.
Thank you, Linda. And we did get your email, by the way. When you mentioned it, I looked and it was there, so appreciate that as well. Next, let's go to Jeremy Stein.
Hello?
Hello, Jeremy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Hello. All right. Yes, at the governor's press conference earlier today, a reporter asked a follow-up question about the statement from the...
Jeremy, do you mind starting with your name and address, please?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. My name is Jeremy Stein, and I am at 72 Gray Street in the West End. I have a junior at, it's a sophomore and a senior at Portland High. At the governor's press conference earlier today, a reporter asked a question about the statement in the Portland Press Herald about the 6 feet as recommended. The Department of Education is available to help schools with their space issues. I'd like to find out what plans have there been in place already for the school, for Portland High and Deering High to utilize the help offered by the Department of Education. My second question is, if by November 13th, the plan is to have another round of assessments to determine whether or not the 10th to 12th graders can come back to school, what needs to change? If Cumberland County is still in the green and has been in the green for the past many months, what needs to change within the school to allow those students to get back into school and have a proper education? And my final question is about the learning labs. The statistics you released showed that 6.5% of the student population is using them. That means over 90% of the school is not getting a proper education. 25 to 30% is the goal. And by what metrics is 70 to 75% of students not getting help, not getting a proper education, the goal? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Next, we'll go to the name says E. Brennan. Is that Aaron Brennan?
They answer those questions? They just went a little crazy.
Did I?
Can we mute Jeremy?
I'm really ready to go for after that, but.
Greg, for this one, you also need to give permission to the phone number ending in 58, please.
Okay. Should be all set.
Aaron?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, great. This is Aaron Brennan. I'm at 27 Clifton Street in Portland. And thanks for taking our comments, and thanks, Jeremy, for pointing out the Learning Center statistics. First of all, I want to say the parent survey went out today, and it was absolutely buried in the flu shot email, so I'm hoping that gets rectified, and sounds like they're going to do that, but, you know, a little bit shocking at this time that it was actually buried. I also want to note that if we're allocated $6 million additional dollars to address our current situation, I implore you to put at least 1% of that towards funds to which Penny St. Louis, who will speak later, outlined in our email today, towards space consulting. Thanks for also Jeremy calling out the fact that there is space consulting at the educational level, and video technology to get our high schoolers back in school. You can tell my focus is going to be on 10th through 12th graders because they are not in school at all, and they need to be prioritized. Prioritized because our core value is equity. This is the most inequitable situation I've seen, and let's just put our monies where our mouths are and bring this back into equity. Our high schoolers are being left out, and so we need to focus on them first. I also, again, thanks Jeremy again for saying we're in green status. We've been in green status. I'm not sure why our children, our 10th through 12th graders, are being treated as though we're in red status. Everybody else in the area is in person to some extent. You know, let's just be equitable not only to our own other children, but also to their peers in the community. The learning centers, obviously a problem, is a Band-Aid. This should not be meant to replace core academic time. Let's forget about evolving from 1 to 25%, you know, to Jeremy's point, 25%, what is that, 75% left out? Let's spend that time and energy focusing on getting kids back in person at least one day a week. We need academic time in person. We don't need, you know, a Band-Aid to help them fill in on what they've missed. Staff challenges. In the report on the 6th, we note that there are 345 available substitutes. What are we doing with those folks? Sounds like we haven't even surveyed them to understand whether they're interested in coming back. 345. That's not a staff challenge. That's
left.
Great. Space issues. I think last year we were discussing combining Portland and Deering because we had excess space. What happened to that space? And I want to thank the school board members who have actually responded to our emails and responded to our requests for support, because this is really, we are dismissing our 10th through 12th graders, and it's becoming scary for them and scary for their futures and scary for their parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Next, we'll go to Penelope St. Louis.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. Thank you, school board members. Thank you, school administration. Thank you, teachers. And thank you, students, for all joining in this dialogue to return our 10th through 12th graders to in-classroom instruction. First, for 10th through 12th graders, this is not hybrid.
With your name and address.
I'm sorry. Yes, thank you so much, Chairman. Thank you. Penny St. Louis, 49 Rosemont Ave, Portland, Maine. My 3 minutes start now, right? Go ahead. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So let's not kid anyone. Hybrid is a misnomer for the 10th through 12th graders in Portland. It is not a hybrid. They are fully remote. And it's frustrating to hear that we keep talking about hybrid models when that's not true. Second, in August, Cumberland County was green. We continue to be green. We have been green the whole entire time. The Maine health system-wide, as of yesterday, had 2 COVID positive patients. 2. So it's frustrating to hear that, York County, Oxford County may have different statistics, but Portland and Cumberland County are green. And we need to remember we are green. We are subjecting 10th through 12th graders to a red scenario, and that is unfair. We are being treated incorrectly by the administration. Secondly, protocols are not 6 feet. I would urge anyone to look at the Department of Education website. It is 6 feet for adults and adult students. High schoolers are not adult students. So let's just be honest about that. These are adolescents. They are children, okay? We like to cast off that they are adults, but they are not. They need us. They are vulnerable. They need guidance. So please do not apply adult standards to our children. Third, the Learning Center, who knows what it is? Nobody. When we've talked to, a group of parents have talked to the school administration, and we have asked them what the Learning Center is, and it is, quote, evolving. And now we're just trying to fill a quota of 25 to 30% active enrollment in the Learning Center, which, quite frankly, parents don't know what it is. Students don't know what it is. teachers don't know what it is. It is not a substitute for in-classroom instruction. The next point. We are not at a significant success level. We can couch this however we want, but our students are suffering. They are suffering academically. They are suffering emotionally.
You have about 5 seconds left.
Thank you. And they are suffering mentally. And I am not making this up. I have known suicidal ideations. I have known students who are saying, why aren't we good enough to get back in school? So I would suggest, this is I would ask for an extension.
Oh, you can have 1 more minute.
Thank you. I have offered, as many parents have, to join with the school department, to volunteer time, to take temperatures in the morning, to coalesce around the Chamber of Commerce and other businesses of the community to assist in trying to get our students 10 through 12 back to school. All we are hearing is it is too complex. I have submitted a letter. I have submitted a recommendation that of the $6.X million that we have received in the second go around, that we dedicate that to our high schoolers to get them back into the classroom. We can always say what we can't do, but what can we do? And I think we're up to the challenge. I'm happy to volunteer my time and effort. I know other parents have offered the same. Please, please get these kids back in school. They need you to advocate for them. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next, let's go. So I see E. Brennan name again. I'm sorry if I skipped you before. I thought it was Aaron again, but if E. Brennan is another person, let's bring them. And did we unmute them, or do we ask to unmute them?
Working on it. They don't seem to be responding.
Okay. Let's leave them there just in case. And then the last person we have is
Roberto. I believe that was Ms. Brennan who spoke earlier, who was on the phone.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. But I wanted to make sure because I know there was a spouse also. So we'll go to Olivia Bean. And let's lower the hands of the people that have spoken already so that we can keep them.
Hello.
Hello, Olivia.
Okay. My name's Olivia Bean. I live on Casco Street in Portland, and I also teach at Portland High. And I just want to say that no one wants the kids back in school more than teachers. Every 10 through 12th grade teacher I see wishes their kids were in front of them. But it's just not possible in the way people want it to be. We're still green and we don't have any cases in our school. And that's more than likely going well so far because it's not full with kids. Safety, like physical safety and well-being, is more important than teaching them how to multiply fractions or do calculus. Like, I think you'd rather have your kid alive or not sick than worrying about homework and being in school. There's a lot of effort from multiple levels to get as many kids in as possible. And there's a lot of assumptions from parents that no one's trying to get more kids in, but exactly what everyone is trying to do is figure out ways to get more kids in the building. So your angry rants are a little frustrating, seeing my principal and other people in the school rack their brains with how they can fit more students. That's all.
Right, next, we'll go to Joe Conroy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thanks.
So we've been talking to parents who have kids in other schools in the area.
Joe, do you mind starting with your name and address, please? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Joe Conroy. I'm at 42 Pitt Street in Portland. My daughter's a junior at Portland High School. And we have friends who have kids in surrounding schools. We know parents who have their kids in South Portland High and in Waynfleet. And they're all getting some form of in-person learning. And you can rest assured that Falmouth and Yarmouth are not shortchanging their high school students. So it's hard for me to understand how Portland School District can be so far behind everybody else in trying to get, our kids have formed their own study pod, they're taking AP Physics, they're taking AP Calculus, and they're trying to figure it out all by themselves. They're getting 3 hours a day, 4 days a week for 12 hours of remote learning and no in-person learning at all. And we're the only school in the entire area that has no in-person learning at all. So it's hard for me to understand why Portland can't figure out how to give these kids something at least. And contrary to what Ms. Bean says, I don't think any of the other surrounding high schools are seeing any kids dying or in fact, there's only a few cases. We're completely green, so it's just hard for me to understand. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised from the public. Actually, yes, we had one come up. Beth Wilson.
Hey there, this is Beth Wilson at 89 Pitt Street.
Beth, give me just 1 second. There you go. I just wanted the other mic to be muted because we were getting some static. Go ahead, Beth. You have 3 minutes.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
I'm the legal guardian of my nephew who's at Portland High School in his senior year. And I've been very thankful for everyone working with him to welcome him to the community. It's been incredibly challenging for him as a senior in a new school and having obviously no in-person instruction. And he is really missing out on the social aspect of his education. So I would love to see him get more opportunities beyond just the afternoon sessions that are offered. I'm a family physician, and I focus a lot on health equity. And one of the things that I worry about is, my nephew will struggle through and he will make it. I have a lot of privilege and I will help him through, but I really worry about low income and minority students who really struggle in our community, and I worry about how we are serving them, and I would love to hear more about that. Thanks so much.
I forgot to unmute myself. It's been a while since that happened. Just so that I don't leave it open-ended, I just want to be real clear, Dr. Wilson, that we don't usually take the questions as a back and forth during public comment, but we have kind of spoken a bit about some of these challenges and some of the work that's going on. I think that we'd be happy to answer a question in detail if you email us a specific question. I don't see any other hands raised from the attendees, so we'll close the public comment on this portion, and then I'll bring the board back to our agenda. Excuse me, guys. I'm trying to get my computer back up. Excellent. All right, so we finished the superintendent's report and the board's commentary. So we'll go to report of the secretary. Consideration and action to approve the minutes of the meeting of September 8th, 2020. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Atkinson, second by Ms. Thompson. Sorry, I saw his hand first. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, are there any public comment on the motion? And seeing none, any board discussion? Seeing none, by roll call, please indicate whether you're in favor of approving the minutes of September 8, 2020.
Sorry about that. Mr. Atkinson?
Yes.
Mr. Balfons?
Yes.
Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Figdor?
Yes.
Ms. Morioni?
Yes.
Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Barrow?
Yes.
And Chair Rodriguez.
Yes. And so that passes unanimously. Next, consideration and action to approve the minutes of the meeting of September 15, 2020. Is there a motion? Mr. Atkinson, second by Mr. Burke. Any questions to the motion? Seeing none, any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, any board discussion? None there either. By roll call, please indicate whether you're in favor of approving the minutes of September 15th, 2020. Superintendent?
Mr. Atkinson?
Yes.
Mr. Balfons?
Yes.
Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Figdor?
Yes.
Ms. Morioni?
Yes.
Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Arrow?
Yes.
And Chair Rodriguez.
Yes. And that's unanimous. Next, the consent items. Will the superintendent please read the list of donations made to the district?
Yes, Chair. Under Board Policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district. And as required by that policy, all of the donations are listed in the board agenda under this item. Our practice is for each donor to receive a written contribution acknowledgement expressing our heartfelt gratitude as well as for their tax purposes. So I would like to thank the many generous contributors to the Portland Public Schools who have made donations of durable goods, goods of substantial value and historical or commemorative significance. And those contributors for this meeting are $50 worth of school supplies from Elizabeth Savigny on 8/27/2020, $100 worth of school supplies from Macy Kelly, $50 worth of school supplies from the Riverton branch of the Portland Public Library from their staff on 8/31/2020. $300 worth of toiletries and laundry detergent from Portland Porpoise Swim Club, care of Karen Tonello and Nicole Snyder. $200 worth of backpacks and markers from Karen Tonello. 24 oak stumps for part of our outdoor learning program from Jim Driscoll. And finally, a $213 one-year subscription to a cybersecurity program from Elizabeth Savigny. I do want to point out that we will be honoring and thanking other people who contributed to our outdoor learning program at our board meeting on the 20th. So I do want to just say thank you to all of these generous individuals for their generous support and contributions to the work of the Portland Public Schools.
Thank you, Superintendent. Healthy list of donations. I always get. It's always a good thing to see those. Next, old business. Consideration and action to approve policy IJJ, selection of educational materials. Is there a motion? Ms. Bondo, second by Mr. Atkinson. Superintendent, can you speak to the motion, or I know Megan is here.
I am going to turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Nally, and I know that our head librarian, Megan Rooks, is also here. So, Malia?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just interested if there's any questions that folks have before discussion. As you recall, we did a workshop on this earlier, and so hopefully you feel grounded in what the changes are and the rationale behind them and the implications of what those changes will be if you approve them this evening.
Board members, if we have any questions, we'll use the raise your hand features, please. I guess I have a couple of questions. And so, Superintendent, you and I, when we spoke last week, and I brought up this policy, I mentioned that I was really excited about it. Number one, because of the amount of work and the time that has gone into this, and that it was delayed, and you know, it's important that we didn't forget about this work. And more specifically, looking forward, as we're interested in, you know, as we say, decolonizing our curriculum and having a more purposeful approach to the content that we have, not just in our curriculum, but obviously in our library. So I made the comment to you that I felt like this policy was very much tied to that approach or to that work from the district. But I felt like it was difficult for me to make the connection. And so I was hoping that either you or perhaps even Megan or Malia could, if it's applicable, make that connection and explain to us why this is so important. And then I also, as part of that question, want to tie it to, we talked about the increase of informal challenges that we have seen lately. And what I would also want to know, what have you seen in the formal challenges to content? And is there a pattern to where these challenges are coming from? Are we seeing a specific type of content being, I guess, challenged? I guess let's not find a different word for that. So I know I kind of mixed a couple of questions all in one commentary, but if someone can address those, I appreciate it.
I'll start, Meg, just because you'll be able to give a lot more illustrative examples to help answer the chair's question. I'll just frame it by saying that, you know, so there's 3 different policies here. So in IJJ, Meg, maybe you could speak to how we intentionally integrated language that speaks to our commitment to equity in terms of in relation to collection development. And then I think to the chair's second piece of the question, it's really in IJJ R2, if you all are looking at that in your board docs. And that's where we talk about how we're protecting the district from challenges that come from outside entities. So I think those are just pointing you to where to find some of those intentional revisions and updates in the policies themselves. And then maybe you could speak to examples of how this comes up for you all in actual practice and what, if any, trends you've experienced as a team in recent years.
As far as thinking about decolonizing the collection and equity in terms of our collection development, the policy hasn't really changed much in that our collection development, and also that this policy covers educational materials and then more specifically library materials. And so in each of those cases, the collection development policy is linked to the curriculum. So it doesn't go into more really specific details about diversity or about decolonization. It just states the intent to follow the curriculum, which is a more fluid thing, if that makes sense. We did think carefully about the wording around including materials from all different points of view. And I believe, Malia, we went to Jesse and to Barrett for help with that wording, as I recall. And then in terms of challenges and what we've seen and what we're concerned about, we have not had a formal challenge that I recall, and I've been in the district for 5 years, and I've talked to some of the older librarians, and they don't recall a formal challenge. So those are rare. The informal challenges is what we've seen an uptick in, and they have mostly been from an equity perspective. So we had an informal challenge around Dr. Seuss. We've had an informal challenge around books that had problematic sorry, I'm losing my ability to come up with words. Views around race, and those, in each case, were hashed out through discussion. And I made the point, I believe, with Ms. Figdor and I think too with Mr. Burke, that when there are those kind of challenges, it's often that someone comes up to us with a concern about a book that we did not intentionally choose, that just happened to be in our collection, and those usually get sussed out, and that we see that the book was problematic for whatever reason, and we take it out of the collection. But there are bound to be instances where a teacher or where a librarian feels that the book does belong and did choose it, and so having a really strong backing around intellectual freedom from the American Library Association wording that we've adopted, and also just a really clear procedure going forward for when there is a challenge, what the procedure is, because in the past, in the earlier versions of the policy, there were two separate challenge policies, which was confusing. So just streamlining that and making it clear that the person with the challenge has read the materials, has read our collection development policy before they go forward, and just outlining what those steps are.
Thank you, Megan. The how many librarians do we have in the district?
7.
7 total. Okay. That's really helpful, and I know that we went over that in our last meeting. This is not a question; it's just kind of like a parting thought before we move. My thought is, as the conversation of decolonizing our curriculum develops, and more people start to bring, I guess an equity lens and a racial awareness lens into all materials that we read. I'm assuming that we'll start to, not assuming, I'm wondering if we will start to see a further increase of those informal challenges. Again, just as we promote seeing material from a different lens. Not to say that we're going to see an increase of material that we get out of our district, but rather the discussion of how we review this material and what is it that we're looking at, what would be deemed to not be appropriate or should not be in our collection. I'm sorry, Megan.
No, and those are that's not policy, but guidelines, and that's something that we're working on as a district to come up with those guidelines, especially around collection development, especially around nonfiction.
And I would just quickly add there that we're also in our ELA vertical team this year going to be working on the reading list for the district, in part to look for the progression over time and coherence. So students aren't reading the same novel a few times and never getting exposed to another, but also taking an equity lens to our review. And questions have come up even recently about times where people have chosen to take a text out of the curriculum. And educators might have challenged that or questioned that. And these policies don't apply to those circumstances. In that case, that's the instructional leader's role to establish the curriculum. This is really when there's something in the collection that people want to challenge taking out. Is that, Meg, would you say that's a correct?
Yeah, we sussed that out this summer.
We did, and I think the other move is something that will happen potentially more as we look more deeply at these books, and so just wanted to clarify that distinction because it's already come up as a question mark as people are aware that we have updated these policies.
Yep. Do we have any other questions from the board? If not, I'll ask for any public comment on the motion. And if I see any hands raised, I'll go over the public comment rules. Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so we'll bring it back to the board for board discussion. Anyone? Okay, don't see any hands. So before we put it to a vote, just want to once again recognize all the work that's gone into reviewing this policy, and that it was a process that started some time ago and that was put on hold, largely because of the pandemic. So I'm really, really proud that it was picked up and it was brought up to us and here for us to approve tonight. Again, just a deep thank you to everyone involved in this work. Yeah, so we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of approving policy IJJ, selection of educational materials, please indicate by roll call.
Yes.
Mr. Balfons?
Yes.
Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Figdor?
Yes.
Ms. Morioni?
Yes.
Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow?
Yes.
And Chair Leviticus.
Yes, and that's unanimous. Next, consideration and action to approve policy IJNC, instructional media centers. Is there a motion? Ms. Figdor, second by Ms. Morioni. Are we going to speak on this motion as well? Nope. Okay. Board members, do we have any questions? Okay, I don't see any board questions. Any public comment on the motion? And again, if I see any hands raised, I'll go over the public comment rules. Okay, I don't see any, so I'll bring it back to the board for board discussion. I'll go to Mr. Burke.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Likewise, I just want to recognize the work that went into both these pieces and the spirit of which is to give Portland students the best that we possibly can. So thank you, Megan. Thank you to the other librarians that worked on this to make sure that we had these in place to guide our work moving forward. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Any other board discussion? Okay, seeing none. We'll put it to a vote. So all those in favor of approving policy IJNC, instructional media centers, please indicate by roll call.
Mr. Atkinson?
Yes.
Mr. Balfons?
Yes.
Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Figdor?
Yes.
Ms. Morioni?
Yes.
Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
And Chair Leviticus. I'm sorry, Ms. Trevorrow first.
Yes.
And Chair Leviticus.
Yes, and so that passes with a unanimous vote as well. Thank you. Next, new business, consideration and action to authorize the school board chair to enter into a contract with Scott Simons Architects in an amount not to exceed $300,000 for architect and engineering services for Americans with Disabilities Act related to improvements to be funded under the State of Maine State School Renovation, Revolving Renovation Fund. Is there a motion? Ms. Morioni, second by Ms. Figdor. Superintendent, can you speak to the motion, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. On this past January, the Portland Public Schools received a commitment from the Maine Department of Education through its School Renovation Revolving Fund loan program to support a number of school improvements tied to American with Disability Act's requirements and multiple schools. Program funding is in the amount of $1,891,179, and it is recorded as a 0% interest loan with 30% of that loan forgiven. The funding must be accessed by January 31st of 2021, which represents an extension approved by the Maine Department of Education over the original July 31st, 2020 date. The improvements must be completed by July 31 of 2021, but we project that because of delays getting the projects off the ground, we may need to request an extension. We have broached that topic with the Department of Ed, and they've agreed that we would do so following the establishment of a realistic project timeline in coordination with our architect and engineering firm. In your packet, you see the projects that will be funded through this loan. You will also note that these projects are in fact being combined with existing district city CIP funding, and that together they will total approximately $3 million. The state revolving renovation fund funds are part of our overall funding mix supporting our CIP projects, so it does not show up in the district's budget this year. The low interest financing that I described earlier was taken into consideration and was part of the reason why we had so many CIP projects approved in FY21. So if you recall, we had about $4.5 million worth of projects, and that was a significant number of those projects were these projects that were going to be funded through the revolving loan fund. In terms of operationalizing it, the city manages the loan process and repayment, and ultimately we will need to budget repayment as part of our overall annual debt service, beginning with the FY22 budget. Assuming that the loan will be paid back in equal installments, the district will be looking at about $130,000 a year. So that's the total loan is about $2 million, and we will pay we'll have to repay 70% of that, so $1.3 million, and that's how we get to the $130 a year. So our staff issued a request for qualifications for qualified architect and engineering firms back in June. 3 firms applied, and their applications were reviewed by a staff team consisting of our facilities department management staff. Based on that review, the first placed firm, which was Scott Simons Architects, was selected. I do want to point out that according to the district's council, under the city's procurement ordinance, the board's authorization is not formally required. However, we decided to ask the board to take this action because of the significant size of the award, and also in an effort to have our decision be transparent with the board and with all of the applicants. This afternoon, we added to the board materials the fee proposal and the fee sheet from Scott Simons in the amount not to exceed $280,000. So you may not have seen that over the weekend because we just finalized those negotiations today and they were updated. So our staff is here, Mr. Stilfen, to answer any questions that you might have about the selection process or where the projects are going. We did review this with the operations committee this past week, so it has had that vetting as well. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Superintendent. Board members, if we have any questions, we'll use the raise your hand features on Zoom. I know a lot of the questions, or at least I know that we went over this on operations last week and covered some of the details. So if we don't have any board questions, I'll move it to public comment. If there's anyone in the attendees that would like to speak to the motion, please use the raise your hand feature. And if I see any hands raised, I'll go over the rules. Yeah, I don't see anyone. So we'll bring it back to the board for board discussion. Anyone? Okay, I don't see anyone. Oh, go to Ms. Moriarty. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say this is really good news, and I just want to make sure, I should have asked it in the question part of it, but I'll just try and couch it as a comment. It seems to be very good news in the sense that this can also assist in the elementary schools that are also under reconstruction. This will help as a portion of that as well. So with that said, it also seems as if that money now can be, or maybe already has been, taken off of the amounts expected to spend for those schools. Kind of a question.
That's correct. So to the extent that some of these, the majority of the projects, as you can see, are not in our BFOF schools, but there are a number of the improvements that are in the last categories of the district ADA compliance issue. Those are building access to our hardware, sinks, things along those lines. So to the extent that some of those are in the schools that are part of the BFOF project, that those costs would obviously come off of that.
Great, but that hasn't been adjusted yet in those amounts for those schools, the BFOF.
I don't know about the specifics of that. I don't know, Steve or Doug. I just noticed, Doug, that you're here. Thank you for being here. So I don't know if you have the specifics on what is actually being done at any of the remaining 3 schools that would actually come off of that, off of the estimates. Anyone?
Doug Sherwood, good evening, everyone. I do not have a summary in front of me for the group that's in the miscellaneous category. It was part 8 of the contract, but there are $338,000 reserved for those miscellaneous across the district, and I'll confirm it by checking the facilities assessment and get back to you in the morning.
That'd be great. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you. I guess the only other, not so much a question as a comment, just to be crystal clear, and the memo states is, I think it's important to always highlight it when there's a selection of any contract, that just to make sure that people will know that board members, or rather elected officials, are never involved in that selection, that's always done through staff. And so you'll see that, and that's obviously to make sure that there are no conflicts of interest. And so you'll see in the memo that it was administrative staff that was involved in the selection process. So other than clarifying that, and if there's no other board comments or discussion, we can bring it to a vote. Excuse me. So all those in favor of authorizing the school board chair to enter into a contract with Scott Simons Architects in an amount not to exceed $300,000 for architect and engineering services for Americans with Disability Act related improvements to be funded under the State of Maine State School Revolving Renovation Fund, please indicate by roll call.
Mr. Atkinson?
Yes.
Mr. Balfons?
Yes.
Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Figdor?
Yes.
Ms. Morioni?
Yes.
Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow?
Yes.
And Chair Rodriguez.
Yes. And so that passes unanimously. Next, we have a first read of policy ACAA, harassment, discrimination, and sexual harassment of students. And a reminder that we have a workshop to review the work that went into the very exciting work and collaborative work with so many community partners and members of our community that went into creating that policy. So please stick around for that immediately after our board meeting. We also have a first read pursuant to section 2307 and 1485, subsection 4 of title 20-A, to authorize the superintendent of schools to transfer from available funds budgeted for the FY 2020 fiscal year operating budget no more than 5% of the total appropriation for any cost center to another cost center or among other cost centers of FY 2020 fiscal year operating budget, provided that the total FY 2020 fiscal year operating budget shall not be increased by such transfers. The superintendent shall provide written communication at the time of such authority is exercised. And so we'll have that on our next meeting for our approval. And then lastly, we have a first read to determine the board positions on the 2020 and 2021 MSBA Delegate Assembly resolutions. Each resolution will be taken up separately in our October 20th meeting. And those have already been, or they're included in tonight's package. So go ahead and take a look at them. There's a couple of interesting ones. I don't think there's anything incredibly controversial in any of them, but they should lend themselves to some good discussion. I find that these resolutions always bring up good discussion from the board. And again, a reminder that we need a delegate, so please communicate with me and the superintendent between now and our next meeting. And then next, we're on to personnel items, consideration and action to approve the personnel items listed, election of teacher candidates probationary. Is there a motion? Ms. Thompson, second by Ms. Morioni. Ms. Stoddard, do you want to speak to the motion? Barbara?
No, there's nothing really to speak to here. These are 3 candidates moving forward for your approval.
Excellent. And so are there any board questions? And seeing none, there is no public comment on personnel items. Any board discussion? Seeing none, so we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of approving, pardon me, excuse me, by roll call, please indicate whether you are in favor of approving the personnel items listed. Please, Superintendent.
Mr. Atkinson?
Yes.
Mr. Balfont?
Yes.
Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Figdor?
Yes.
Ms. Morioni?
Yes.
Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow?
Yes.
And Chair Rodriguez.
Yes. So that motion passes unanimously as well. Next, consideration and action to approve the personnel items listed, election of teacher candidates, 1 year only. Is there a motion? Ms. Bondo, second by Mr. Atkinson. Is there anything to add to this one, Barb?
The only thing I'll add here is I just want to thank all of my staff as well as the hiring managers across the district. You'll see there are 21 one-year-only teachers here. We are very slowly getting to the end of our processing, but it's been quite a feat, and I just want to express appreciation for everyone's patience and work on this.
And can I just add to that first, my appreciation to the HR staff for their work on this, but also to take a moment to point out that many of these are the positions that are being implemented as a result of our, of the different ways that we've had to configure schools and grant leaves and things along those lines in order to be able to reopen schools. So some of these are the positions that we are going to need to be making decisions about in the near future as well.
Thank you, Superintendent. Is there any questions? See none. There's no public comment on personnel items. So is there any board discussion? Seeing none. Oh, again, Mr. Berg, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yep, just want to express the gratitude of remembering the conversations we had about what Barb and her team were facing to get to this point, and just also want to honor and mark all the work that you did to get here. Thank you.
Ms. Bondo?
Yeah, just a clarification. Those are the backfill position then we try to adopt today?
These are a mix of backfill as well as some additions that we needed for the structure of the hybrid model.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you.
Okay. If we don't have any other or any further board discussion, I'll thank the HR department for all their work. They, I'm sure there's still so much on your desk to go through, but immensely thankful for all the work and the load that you guys are lifting for the district. Clearly, as we heard today, staffing seems to be the biggest challenge, not just in finding folks, but in how we allocate our funds and work with these restrictions. So immense amount of work that you guys are doing, and so we're immensely proud of the accomplishment. Let's put it to a vote. By roll call, please indicate whether you're in favor of approving the personnel items listed. Superintendent?
Mr. Atkinson?
Yes.
Mr. Balfont?
Yes.
Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Figdor?
Yes.
Ms. Morioni?
Yes.
Ms. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Trevaro,
Yes.
and Rodriguez.
Yes. And so that's unanimous. Next, given that it's before the hour, given that it's before 10 p.m., is there any public comment on items not in this evening's agenda? Okay. And before I go to, I see one hand raised. Before I go to attendees, I'm going to go over the public comment rules. Members of the public are to use the raise your hand feature provided by Zoom. This feature is either found at the, on the webinar control bar at the bottom of your screen, or it can be found by selecting your name on the participant screen. I will call your name out and ask you to please state your name and address, and then you'll have 3 minutes to comment. When you get near the end of the 3 minutes, I'll try to politely interrupt you. And if you need additional time, 1 more minute will be granted, at the end of which I will probably mute your microphone. So having said that, we'll go to the list of attendees. I'm going to be a little bit lenient here. Ms. St. Louis, since you spoke earlier today, I'm going to try to just ask that we not speak on items that were on tonight's agenda for this particular public comment. This is public comment for items not on this evening's agenda. So I just want to be clear about that. So we'll start with Penelope. I'm so sorry. Penelope.
That's okay.
St. Louis.
Penelope, yes.
I'm sorry, I couldn't get out of my own way.
No, it's late. I perfectly understand and appreciate the comment. So I'm going to try not to repeat myself, but what I'm very concerned about is a disconnect, quite honestly, between communication that's relayed to the board and communication that is relayed to parents. And I really do believe, full transparency, we're all in this together. COVID is an amazing and unprecedented event. I feel, as long as in addition to other parents feeling the same way, that we are not being transparent between the administration, what the administration is telling the school board, what the administration is telling the parents, and what the parents are expecting of the administration. For example, the survey that went out in August, where more than 90% of parents wanted children to return to school in person, has been discounted and has been categorized as parents didn't understand what return to school really meant. So we're going to send out another survey. However, the survey that was sent out was buried today in a newsletter at the very end of the newsletter, which most parents, and quite honestly, I didn't recognize until 2 other parents brought it to my attention, that the survey was hidden at the bottom of the newsletter. So we're all in this together. We all want what's best for our children. And so to hide a survey at the bottom of a newsletter is a bit disingenuous when parent committee was told last week that we were going to send out another survey and it was going to be great, and we were going to categorize it by student responses and parent responses and teacher responses, and it was all going to be good and transparent. I question that. I have faith in this board, but I also have faith in our children. And so to say 6 feet for adult students, that's adults that are attending adult education. I've attended adult education through the Portland school system. That's me they're talking about when they say 6 feet distance. That is not my 17-year-old. That is not the 15-year-old sophomore. That is not the 16-year-old junior. So let's be transparent. The Department of Education has been very clear on what the standards are for returning these kids to school. And I'm really saddened by the obfuscation of what we're dealing with here. So I think we formed a parent committee to try to work with the school administration and say, how can we help you? I am more than willing if there's a staffing issue.
Do you need another minute?
I need an extension.
We'll give you one more minute and then I'll mute you.
Yes, I'm more than willing, and other parents are more than willing to take temperatures in the morning to assist the administration. And we have offered repeatedly to provide the Chamber of Commerce assistance, business assistance, parent assistance, and we've been shut down at every avenue that we've explored. And it's disheartening. I mean, I really have faith. I've contacted several of you to talk independently. My child is suffering. You know what? The kids in Riverton are suffering. The kids throughout the city in grades 10 through 12 are suffering. I know of suicide attempts. I'm not talking about, imaginary things. People and students are affected by this. They are not adults, they're students. So I hope, some of you have students that have, luckily gone on to college. It's not an impact to you anymore. And I could point fingers, and I'm not going to do that. But think about it if it were your kids.
I'm going to ask you to wrap it up, please. Your time is up.
Thanks. Think about it if it were your high school junior, your high school senior. And I really beseech you to, take another look at this. I don't even know what the next step is. I don't know if it's Indigenous Peoples Day, if it's November, if it's December. I just don't know. I'm the only parent, Chair Rodriguez, I'm the only parent here. And I know we're all tired. I'm tired. I've worked a full day. I've counseled my child. We're all tired, but what's the next step here to getting our 10th through 12th graders back into the classroom?
So, Penelope, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up, and we'll have to mute your microphone and move on.
That's my question.
We had a presentation at the beginning of this meeting today where we went over that information and we discussed all of the challenges that the district faces to returning high school students into the buildings. I think we also emphasize that we are all trying and we're all invested in accomplishing that. But as we reviewed, there's a lot of challenges. I've expressed to this board, to the superintendent, and to the community that I agree it is immensely inequitable. And I do worry about our students. Every member of this board has expressed that. We just have not been presented with a path that allows us to return them to the buildings while maintaining the safety and health protocols that this board has agreed to maintain for the district. And that's the unfortunate dead end that we're in right now. I don't think that the work has concluded. I take the superintendent's word and his staff's word that we're still exploring options, but no option that seems to be viable has been presented yet. And no one's happy about this. No one is. I think we've acknowledged that we are very concerned for children. We've acknowledged that this is immensely inequitable. We've acknowledged that the gaps are widening. And we've acknowledged that no one wants to be where we are today. We've also acknowledged that everyone is working as hard as they've possibly ever worked in their entire careers, and that no one is prepared to take on these challenges. And any assumption that we have all the answers or that anyone has all the answers, I think needs to be slowed down just a bit, because no one has the answers. Simple as that. If they did, I think it'd be pretty obvious because everyone would be running in that direction. But no, instead, everyone is just scrambling, trying to figure things out. And I get the frustration. And I'll remind members of the public that the majority of this board are parents. So we have children in these buildings. We're seeing it from a parent point of view. We all live in this community, so we're certainly seeing it from a community member's point of view. And of course, we're seeing it from a policymaker's point of view. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating as could be. I'll leave it at that. so we can conclude our meeting and then move on to our workshop. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting, please. Mr. Atkinson, second by Mr. Burke. All those in favor, please indicate, and you can raise our hand for this vote. I need Ms. Trevorrow. There you go. Just cameras on. Okay, and that's unanimous. We've adjourned at 9:14 p.m.